exceeds at the time of the 2021 budget. This is largely due to the commodity boom, which cannot be relied on over the medium term. In 2022, medium-term budget policy statement, revenue collection indeed exceeded projections at the time of the 2022 budget. We felt it's appropriate to allocate this money to narrow the deficit, mitigate some risk associated with the growing debt. We also felt that it's important to allocate this money for service delivery, which had seen additional resources provided for security forces, health, education, and local amenities, as well as infrastructure investment. Chair, any decision to move forward with the Sovereign Wealth Fund needs to take this context into account. As National Treasury, we are of the view that the establishment of the fund should be considered at a later stage and will continuously report to the House on the suitable models that are appropriate for us to introduce this fund. I thank you.
Thank you. Let me just say, even though I have the discretion powers to give you extra minutes, please try to time to 4 minutes. 142.3 allows us to give you extra time, but let's stick to our minutes. We now proceed to the Honorable Shibambu.
No, thank you very much, House Chair. Like, just to give a clearer context, is that in this Parliament, the commitments to establish a sovereign wealth fund was, after the proposal made by the EFF was repeated by your president and by the overzealous but like largely incompetent Minister of Trade and Industry, that there will be an establishment of sovereign wealth fund, and that can be done in a fiscally neutral way, meaning that you can top slice some of the investments which the PIC and IDC have overexposure on without touching the fiscus. I don't know why you could come here to justify the non-establishment of a sovereign wealth fund on the basis of the fiscal incapacity to do so. It looks like generally you are very scared of the financial markets and the financial system and services sector in South Africa, because you yourself as a deputy minister were mandated to establish a state-owned bank using African Bank as a nucleus. You have not done so. There's a resolution of your own party on the nationalization of the Reserve Bank. You have not done so. Are you that scared of the financial services sector that all the resolutions that are taken, including on the Sovereign Wealth Fund, you always duck and dive and give all sorts of petty and unsatisfactory reasons as to why you cannot establish these institutions, which are otherwise essential for the sustainability and growth of South Africa's economy? Thank you very much.
Thank you. The Honorable the Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Chair. We make history out of the conditions that are not of our own making. Would have loved to establish the fund and have articulated the conditions under which made it difficult for us at that time to establish the fund. And as I said, that we are committed to establishing the fund. We are looking at different options, at different models. And as we always do, we'll come back to this House and give progress report on how far we are in establishing the fund. Yes, the issue of the state bank was not part of the question, but I'm not going to run away from it. The Minister of Telecommunication and Technology, well, we missed part of what she was saying, but one of the things that she was saying is that we are establishing the state bank, making the state bank, turning Post Bank into the state bank, and they are in the process of acquiring the license from the South African Reserve Bank. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The Honorable Abraham.
Thank you. Thank you so much, House Chair. Deputy Minister, the long-standing position of the governing party is that a sovereign wealth fund be established to deal with the free carry shares that occur in the mineral resources sector and other resources sectors. Raising new sources of revenue is in our national interest. And you have often stated this yourself in order to supplement the fiscus for multiple demands. The reference to an unaffordable permanent commitment suggests that the sovereign wealth fund is off the table for now. Honorable Deputy Minister, kindly share with the House the alternatives currently pursued. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The Honorable Deputy Minister.
Honorable Chair, we all know that our fiscus is highly constrained. And the sources for revenue, as we all know, it's on the tax side. And the most sustainable way of generating revenue to finance what we have to finance as government is through growing the economy. Because it is out of the growth of the economy that will have the material basis to generate sustainable revenue, including budget surplus that we can use to establish the sovereign wealth fund. It is for this reason that we are focusing on dealing with the supply side constraint of our economy, the supply of electricity, telecommunication, skills, in order to grow our economy. On the borrowing side, there are challenges. As you all know, that our public debt is 4 trillion. And we cannot continue to borrow. There's limits to borrowing. Borrowing in itself, it's not bad. If we're borrowing to build infrastructure, to support education, that is more sustainable. But if we're borrowing to recapitalize SOEs that are not adding value to the economy, we will set the very same conditions that will undermine our sovereignty, because we'll be forced to borrow more outside. And once we're at that level, our sovereignty will be gone. And unsustainable public debt has its own risks, as we've always said, that it crowds out public investment. Chair, at the moment, we pay 300 billion rand per year just to service the public debt. But what it also does, it crowds out the private sector, because the money that we borrow is the savings that South Africans are making. And if there isn't enough savings in our economy, the private sector, business people will be without any capital to borrow in order for us to grow our economy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable.
For subsequent questions, which are follow-up questions, is 2 minutes. The Honorable George.
Thank you, Chairperson. A sovereign wealth fund is essentially a state-owned investment fund and it needs capital to invest. Government's loan debt will increase from 4.7 trillion to 5.6 trillion, and debt service costs will increase from 332 billion to 380 billion over the medium term. Debt service costs are already the highest single expenditure item on the budget and crowds out service delivery to the poorest households. ESCOM debt transferred to the national balance sheet will add another 200 billion at least to the mountain of debt that the failing ANC government piled onto the people of South Africa. In his medium-term budget policy statement, the minister completely ignored the cost of living crisis and instead bailed out the NEL, Transnet, Sunrail with 30 billion rand and has apparently now agreed to finance a state bank by transferring ownership of the post bank from the post office, making the post office even less viable and putting 11,000 jobs at risk. The post office and the post bank will be requesting bailouts that the people will need to pay for. No. Households are unable to save when they have a massive amount of debt to repay, and government is the same. If South
Honorable
Africa were a
member,
household-
your minute is long gone. You can see the watch is
2
close
minutes,
to you.
Do I have not 2 minutes?
No, don't raise your hand. What are you saying? I'm talking to the honorable member. Do you want to come in? Yes,
Chairperson, according to the rules, it's 90 seconds for a follow-up and 2 minutes for the member answering the question. So if he's spoken for 60 seconds, he still has 30 seconds
no,
left.
listen, you are on the wrong one. I don't know which one you are talking to. Please say it. It's 1 minute. There's no such. Anyway, ask the question, honorable member. I
Your
have them
reply,
here.
Deputy Minister, are you trying to launch a taxpayer-funded sovereign wealth fund stealthily via a state bank for the benefit of a few politically connected elite? Thank you.
To help you, Honorable McPherson, is rule 142.3. I mean, 5. I'm sorry. There's no 90 seconds. And I say it all the time. Please, let's get used to these things. No. This side, there is a rule that allows me to give them extra time. There's no rule that allows you to get extra time. And if you want extra time from the questions that you ask, it's okay. We can do that through the relevant processes of the sub rules on committees, on rules.
House Chair,
Honorable member, Honorable Deputy Minister, can you please?
House Chair,
Yes.
House Chair member entering here. Chair, if I could ask, then please, I also looked at the time for the previous speaker. And the previous speaker before the speaker that just spoke now in terms of the supplementary question had 1 minute and about 40 seconds.
No,
So you
No.
gave the latitude.
no. There's a watch here
You gave the latitude.
and you can
Speaker.
check the minutes. It won't
So I'm
happen. I
asking
won't
you-
do that.
I'm asking for you to be consistent.
No. Don't come with things that are not there. They are taking minutes here. I don't want to make a mistake like that. No, I thought you were, no, let me not go there. It's fine. Honorable Deputy Minister, can you respond? I always give members who ask questions extra seconds, but I've never gone to that and I will never do it. That's why I gave him the most. And that's why I had to say it. Proceed.
Thanks, Chair. The unfortunate thing is that members are also asking questions which are not a follow-up on the sovereign wealth fund. And as a result, we answer them because we don't want to be seen as running away from questions. But I will have to be disciplined that I'm not gonna deal with the question on the state bank because I did try to answer that. The intention of a sovereign wealth fund and the experiences in other countries that we've seen, like the United Emirates, I think they've always been very useful because those countries, they use the surplus budget that they have to deploy that money for other important economic developmental imperatives in their own countries. I mean, Dubai, the Emirates, they've turned that desert into something else. and they've used the surpluses that they've generated out of oil, and we're constrained in our context. We don't have surpluses, but we said we have to make plans to make sure that we deal with this. But on the ESCOM issue, the minister has said that he could not announce the details of the liability solution for ESCOM. There are a number of things that we're looking at, because the liability solution will be contingent upon the tariff decision that has to be taken for ESCOM in December, the debt instruments that ESCOM has, but also the conditions that we've got to impose ourselves as National Treasury as part and parcel of providing a liability solution for ESCOM. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Just to help Honorable Thring, Honorable Shibambu, as the first person to ask the supplementary question, has 2 minutes. That is where you got lost.
Then I retract and apologize.
Thank you very much. We now on the Honorable Heron.
Thank you, House Chair, and thank you, Deputy Minister. Deputy Minister, the establishment of a sovereign wealth fund has been discussed for many years and was in fact floated in 2020 by former Minister Finance Tito Mboweni, when he suggested that we could capitalize a sovereign wealth fund with an amount of about 30 billion rand, with a variety of possible sources, such as the proceeds of spectrum allocation, petroleum, gas, or mineral rights royalties, and the sale of non-core state assets. However, these plans seem to be pushed aside when we were hit with the COVID-19 pandemic. But today we found our country in the midst of another pandemic, with millions of people being unemployed and living well below the food poverty line. And this current crisis once again highlights the need for a basic income guarantee for our most vulnerable. Currently, we face a situation that even if unemployment rates come down, the number of those unemployed will remain the same over the next 2 decades. Funding the basic income grant now seems to be the main reason for delaying its establishment. Can a sovereign wealth fund not be used to speed up the process of implementing a basic income grant? Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Deputy Minister.
Thanks, Chair, once more. To establish a sovereign wealth fund, you need funds. And we have always come to this House to articulate how constrained we are insofar as the funds are concerned. And like I said, in the initial intervention I made, that we will come back to this House to articulate, to provide progress report on what are the options we're looking at in establishing the fund. Thank you.
Thank you. We proceed to question 810, which has been asked by the Honorable Malinga to the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy. Honorable, it's 810.
Thank you, President.
Yes, in Africa, you are called president. In Africa, yes, you are called that. Thanks.
I thought I was in the PAP. My apologies. Currently, the Strategic Fuel Fund holds 10.3 million barrels of crude oil as strategic fuel reserves. But it envisages that a maximum of 6 million barrels are going to be sold to pay back to the Treasury the amount that was used to subsidize the end consumer on the price of fuel. So in simple terms, what will be left will be 4.3 million barrels of crude oil. The remaining refining capacity in the country is about 200,000 barrels per day, and the remaining crude would sustain the refinery for 20 days. If you count, you can do it. Now, such a fuel fund is in a process of increasing the storage capacity for refined petroleum. Because we think now, because the refining capacity has come down, it makes sense and logical to also have a strategic stock in refined petroleum. It is expected that they will reach critical storage capacity in the next 24 months. After which period, and subject to allocation of funds by the national government to procure refined petroleum products, SSF will be in a position to hold refined stock in strategic reserves. So, looking forward, the strategic stock now of crude oil. Refining capital has come down. We're looking at developing strategic stock of refined petroleum.
Thank you. The Honorable Malinga.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair, and thank you, Minister, National Chair. Since importing crude oil without refinery capacity is unsustainable, thus investment in local refineries must be encouraged. What is the status of the department's attempt to attract private investment to improve the country's refinery capacity? And why is the government reluctant to invest in local refineries if there are monetary returns to be made for investors? Thank you very much.
The Honorable the Minister.
I'm not sure what is meant by reluctance. I don't understand that, because those who follow discussions in this space will know that we made all the efforts to be part of reviving SAPREF. But in the middle of that process, SAPREF was subject to the disaster in KZN. So that is not a sign of reluctance. It's a sign of willingness to increase the refining capacity. We're engaging a number of players to build a refining capacity in the country. I can say that, though it's not conclusive, one of the issues that we raised with Saudi Arabia was the Saudi Aramco proposal of building a refinery in the country. And if we succeed, we'll build that capacity. We know the risk of a less refining capacity, but if there's that risk, you mitigate that risk by increasing storage of refined petroleum. That is what we're working on, so that we also mitigate the question of reduced refining capacity.
Thank you. Mama Doka.
Thank you, Chairperson. Minister, we were informed that the sale of the crude oil reserves was being done to protect the country's economy and also South Africans from rising fuel prices. And despite warnings that the sign would be a temporary remedy and quite risky, leaving us with significantly less strategic fuel stocks, which would leave us in very vulnerable spaces, the decision was made nonetheless. Why, after it was promised that the sale of strategic fuel stocks would take care of this, are we still urged to anticipate fuel price hikes?
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
The decision was directed specifically to the end consumer. Now, I agree with you, end consumers are part of the economy. That's why we subsidize energy at R1.50 a liter at that point in time. That was not general economy, that was the end consumer. And it was a correct decision at the time, because the end consumer could not afford the price. The issue is when there are geopolitical developments that impact on the price of any product, be it petroleum, be it food, is something that doesn't treat South Africa as an island. It impacts on every country. So the Russia-Ukraine conflict is the most serious factor in the increase of the price of petroleum. We're hoping that if peace is found, we'll normalize the price of petroleum. And that is what we can do. And the last point I want to add, we're hoping that we can discover our own oil so that we can also be able to refine our own oil and be having a say in the price of that oil.
Thank you. Honorable Kwangwa.
Chairperson, thank you very much. Minister, what resource commitments have department made towards improving the refinery storage? And what are the timeframes that we're looking at so that we're able to resolve this matter speedily? Thank you.
Minister ubheka labo uhleli khona ukho. Oh, uthaka kuvanga ngiyakuvumela uqhube.
No, thank you. The
Une
question, Minister,
ekhonyana.
all right, let's try something else. Minister, is thank you very much.
Yes, now we can hear you.
Thank you. What resource commitments has your department and government made towards improving this refinery storage that we're talking about, the capacity, and what are the timeframes that we are looking at?
Okay. Ungasayibuyiseli lento obuyifakile.
Enkosi, there's an entity in the department called the Strategic Fuel Fund. That entity is a subsidiary of Central Energy Fund. It is focusing on the issue of the movement of fuel in the country. And it is well resourced, it is profitable, it's financially sound, and therefore building additional storage capacity is one of the programs that are underway currently as we speak. And we're doing that because we know that more storage capacity will always be needed in times of crisis. We're doing that in Saldanha, we're doing that, increase the capacity of storage in Mosul by next to Petro SA, and we're hoping to increase it dramatically so that we can have capacity to store fuel.
Thank you. Honorable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, House Chairperson. Honorable Minister, your former Premier, Sishla Zikalala, has alluded to the fact that they are in discussions with SAPRAF and others. And as you know, many people blame the Russian-Ukraine war for fuel shortage all over the world. Russia has offered us crude oil, and unfortunately, we don't have the capacity to refine it. And of course, you can pay for it in South African rand, not in the US dollar. Now, can you take us into your confidence? How far is this negotiation? Because I'm not sure that storage alone, Minister, is the solution to the problem. Because there'll be extensive job losses if these refineries that have now shut down and others that are contemplating so. So I don't think it's only an issue of storage, but also to refine as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Let me repeat my answer. What I said in terms of refining, it has come down that 2 refineries that are still operational today. We're looking at increasing the refining capacity. That's why we're talking to Saudi Aramco again to revive the discussion we had much earlier. When it comes to SAPRAF, there were discussions on SAPRAF until there was a disaster that totally destroyed SAPRAF. And everybody want to take SAPRAF now. When we discuss with them, they talk about the geographical advantage of SAPRAF. But in terms of the capacity of the facility, there's nothing. Basically, you are buying a facility with no value at this point in time. But we're looking forward to increasing the refining capacity. We also think that storage capacity is going to be very important because if you don't have refining capacity, storage capacity helps you to store refined petroleum. And therefore, you are talking to the market and the consumption of the product.
Thank you. I hope, Honorable Nchaveni, we're gonna now go together We are actually on your second question, but I would like to return to question 809, where you were still responding to the Honorable Mthembu. I'm not sure if you may not remember, I can allow Honorable Mthembu to come back and post her supplementary question. Honorable Mthembu, can you please do that for us?
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair. Honorable Minister, what are the ongoing linkages that will continue to exist between the Post Bank and South African Post Office? B, how will such linkages contribute to the Post Office of Tomorrow strategy, which intends to put SAPO in a healthier state than it finds itself today? Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair.
Thank you. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. The Post Bank and SAPO will continue to share infrastructure with the exception of the bank's infrastructure that is regulated by the Banks Act. In this regard, their relationship will be governed by the cooperation and service level agreements. And in terms of what we are doing to reposition SAPO as a logistics and business, targeting in particular the poor and small businesses, they will greatly benefit from the SMME financing and assurance that the Post Bank is going to extend, because they can then have a one-stop center where to go to get financing and once they package. If you recall, when you go to post your valuable packages, there's insurance that is required and all those things. They can then get that insurance there, because majority of our SMMEs, in particular the ones who do businesses from rural areas, they do not have insurance or for their goods that they sell to people when they dispatch them from on courier services. And it's for that reason that the relationship would work better, and the value that will, the Post Bank as a bank with expanded services, it will be able to extend to the clients of SAPO, who will also in turn become clients of the Post Bank. Thank you.
Thank you. You are now very clear. Thank you very much. Honorable Pambo. Honorable Pambo.
Thank you very
Yes.
much, House Chair. Given the lack of control measures within the Post Bank, as reported by the AG, which have essentially led to bank cards, in particular the SASA Bank beneficiary cards, being stolen and leading to the Post Bank being defrauded, what control measures have been put in place to ensure that Post Bank does not experience this fraud again? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, House Chair. Honorable Pambo will recall that when the AG presented that report to the Portfolio Committee, the AG also indicated that they are working closely with the department and the Post Bank on those improvements, and that there's work that has been done already in terms of the action plan to address those findings, to make sure that those controls are in place. Those controls must be in place before the Post Bank is licensed, and the Post Bank is working with the Prudential Authority on those plans. Honorable Pambo will recall that the AG indicated that the extra audit they did on the Post Bank was at the request of the minister to make sure we stem the weaknesses of those controls, and that now we have a fully fledged board as approved by Cabinet and with a no objection from the Auditor General SA and the Prudential Authority. In addition, the Post Bank has started mechanism to improve their ICT infrastructure, which was very old because it was the post office infrastructure and it was not meeting the standards that are required by the Banking Association. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Majosi.
Honorable House Chairperson, I'll take the question on behalf
Thank
of
you.
Honorable
Proceed.
Majosi. The Honorable Minister, considering your own strategy to implement information technology modernizations at the bank, and considering that it suffered a series of cyber attacks resulting in the loss of funds, what infrastructure, insofar as ICT is concerned, will the bank be undertaking to improve its own systems to ensure that the bank functions as effectively as other licensed banks, and also considering that the responsibility of OIR largely rests with your own department, And therefore, this should be the flagship project of the department to demonstrate your own capabilities and abilities insofar as IT infrastructure is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable the Minister. It was Honorable Sengwa asking. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. The Post Bank has started to undertake the modernization process. But before the modernization it was even embarked on, there had to be controls that are put in place in governance. If honorable members will recall the hacks that happened and it was not cyber crime and the hacks, it was theft that happened in 2020 and 2021 earlier. They were flagged out, but they were not able to be traced by the Post Bank on time. But however, now there are enough measures in place to know and detect even attempts to defraud. And the bank cards, if you recall, the bank cards are in the process of being replaced to comply with the banking requirements and the discussions with the Social Development Department and SASSA have already commenced, and also I think they have been concluded. We are aware of the responsibility to make sure that we leapfrog the Post Bank to the bank that to be competitive in terms of technology, and there's a full roadmap that will be shared with the portfolio committee when it's finalized, but in an environment that protects the commercial interest of the Post Bank. Thank you.
Thank you. The last question is from Honorable Threng.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. Minister, irregular expenditure at Post Bank rose by 118 million in the 21-22 financial year, and the state-owned entity failed to reach its priority target of acquiring a banking license. According to the Auditor General, the inappropriate spending resulted from services that were procured without contracts in place and non-adherence to procurement processes, as well as the failure of having sufficient consequence management efforts and no internal processes established to deal with consequence management caused the escalation of irregular expenditure. Now, in the light of the above, does the minister not think it prudent to remedy these internal administrative and financial inefficiencies before attempting to obtain a banking license? If yes, then how and by when? If not, why not? Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. Indeed, the irregular expenditure rose and all the weaknesses that were pointed out, as I've indicated earlier when I was responding to the question by Honorable Sengwa, those irregularities were picked up by an audit that was special audit that was requested by the minister from the Auditor General in terms of the ICT environment, but also the governance environment. At the time when the post office, this Post Bank had to be moved, there was a moratorium placed on them because they did not have a fully fledged board. Until recently, the Post Bank had only a board of only 3 members, which did not constitute a full board. In addition, the Post Bank did not have what we call competent officials to do the governance, and they did not have a structure that was fully compliant with a banking structure. And we needed to then allow the AG to point us to the deficits, but also working on the improvement. That's why I have announced that the Post Bank board was appointed by cabinet, and they took effect from the 1st of October 2022 as part of remedying all those weaknesses that were shared with the portfolio committee that are in the audit report, the annual report of the post office, as part of a plan to make sure by the time the Prudential Authority evaluates the license application of the Post Bank, though everything that is of concern have been addressed and we are on course. And just to give comfort to the members, the Post Bank continuously meets with the Prudential Authority to assess the progress. There is an indication of satisfaction with the progress that has been reached so far from the Prudential Authority side. We have developed a full roadmap on how we are going to satisfy the conditions as set by the Prudential Authority for the Post Bank to meet the requirements of a bank. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is question 822, asked by the Honorable Majosi to the Minister of Communications and Digital Communication Technologies. Sorry. Honorable Minister Nchaweni. 822.
I'm trying to find question 822. They were not done in a order, in a sequencing. Okay, thank you, Honorable House Chair. There has been a total of 258 reported burglary incidents at the SAPO branches. I must indicate that as from the 1st of October 2022, the SASSA grant payments have been taken over by the Post Bank, and the necessary arrangements have been put in place to ensure that if there are burglaries or anything that will interfere with the dispensing or disbursing of grants at the post offices, the beneficiaries of SASSA grants can be redirected to the ATMs and to the retail partners of the Post Bank. Thank you.
Thank you. We proceed to the Honorable Majosi.
Honorable House Chairperson, again, I will take the supplementary question. Thank you, Chair. Honorable Minister, at the heart of the disbursement of the SASSA grants is, of course, the fact that the majority of South Africans rely on functional post office and post bank, as you now add the rider. So one of the major issues that needs to happen is the issue of access, but at the same time, you are rationalizing offices and closing them down. So whilst there's the limitations of burglaries, on the other hand, is the limitation of access to these offices, and the fact that the rollout of the cards, which will ensure that people access funds at the ATMs in itself, is a problem. So what action steps then are you following to deal with the technical glitches that lead to recipients of the SASSA code cards being unable to withdraw their funds? And what steps is SAPO taking to prevent technical glitches affecting grant recipients withdrawing funds? And further, what is the update actually for SAPO taking the update on their computers and technologies at the branches? All in all, the questions I'm putting are one, it's about the technological capabilities and innovations of the post office. Manje, o standard grade vele bazodonsa ngodizi. But ngiyamthemba Minister ukuthi uzokwazi ukuyiphendula le mbuzo.
Honorable Hlengwa, no, you don't do that.
Chair, my apologies. It's all banter, I apologize.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. Although the questions were asked as it relates to SAPO, I'm going to assume that given that is Post Bank who has taken over, the same questions will apply. We have lifted the moratorium on the IT infrastructure, IT procurement, because there was also a moratorium that was placed on the procurement of IT infrastructure until the governance are in place to avoid fruitless and wasteful expenditure. The moratorium on IT procurement, in fact, on all procurement, and the moratorium on the Post Bank has been lifted for them to be able to procure and upgrade their equipment. I'm happy to announce that there is sufficient progress, including moving the Post Bank data center fully to the cloud, so that you cannot have the attempts to then hack or breach the security at the data center. And whilst in the process, the data center of SAPO is going to be upgraded to make sure that it also continues to serve as the redundancy. We are discussing the modalities of how that will be done. The upgrade of the technology infrastructure is fully underway, including the replacements of the card. If you recall, the cards were not fully compliant with the requirements of the Banking Act. That's why the technical glitches continue to come through. And as I've responded earlier, there will be the replacement will take place soon. We will soon share with the portfolio committees details of not only the branch strategy of Post Bank, but also the roadmap of Post Bank being fully compliant with the portfolio committee, including on the ICT part, which is the major part of it. And in line with that, that will also in turn benefit the post offices in terms of the upgrade that will take place when we prepare for the Post Bank branches. And therefore, the problems with the SASSA beneficiaries that are related to the cards and the technical glitches are a temporary measure. I don't think it will take us more than 6 months to have fully complied. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Gumbu.
Thank
Honorable
you,
Gumbu.
House Chairperson. Honorable Minister, criminal acts at the South African Post Office, such as those of burglary and corruption carried out within, are detrimental to the life of the organization as they impact on its ability to optimally render its services and maintain credibility. Considering its financial challenges, what measures will be put in place to beef up the security in order to curb these acts from continuing as SAPO implements its South African Post Office of Tomorrow strategy?
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Gumbu, for that question. As we've indicated in the portfolio committee, when SAPO, with the improvements of security, have seen a reduction of the incidences of burglaries that have happened and incidences that have been linked to other security glitches that related to the grants, even when we're transitioning. Even that situation is the same at the Post Bank. Unfortunately, I cannot give the detail because it may compromise the security of both SAPO and the Post Bank and their social grant beneficiaries. But there is a full measures that are being rolled out in place to make sure that there is security both at SAPO and Post Bank. But as it relates to SAPO, we remain with a challenge of cash flow. We have applied and engaged with National Treasury on a number of occasions on the funding of SAPO, given the challenges that SAPO had, the current board and management of SAPO have inherited in terms of an unviable infrastructure. And if you recall, when the Auditor General of South Africa was putting a report on the SAPO performance for the period, they've indicated that there is a marked improvement in the performance of SAPO. The challenge is that it is the depth of the challenges where they come from that does not seem to register the progress, but there is significant progress when the analysis is done. We are confident that with the measures in place, and if National Treasury can then accede to our request to fund SAPO so that we can save some of the jobs. We know we will not be able to save all of the jobs, but we can also improve the infrastructure of SAPO and can be able to render services as SAPO of tomorrow. I'm glad to also announce that SAPO has major contracts that, if supported, SAPO will be a viable business. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Kochler.
Thank you, Chairperson. Minister, not counting the 146 branches which have been closed as detailed in the annual report as such, those that are still open are mainly dirty, derelict and dangerous to work at. Now, as the post office management are desperate enough to fraudulently take their workers' medical aid contributions to try and make ends meet, where are they supposed to find the money to keep those post offices clean and make them safe, especially as you want to remove the Post Bank, perhaps from the premises and the SASSA grant payments with it. Now, the Post Office owes 8.2 billion Rand and received a disclaimer. So the new strategy seems unlikely to fly. Now, what have you done, if anything, to save the post offices and their staff across the country? Or are you only really focusing today on the Post Bank being pushed to become a state bank and content to throw the post office to the wolves?
Thank you. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. It is interesting that when we, without even bringing the matter of the state bank, the first preoccupation of my tenure in this department was to bring a plan of repositioning SAPO as a SAPO of tomorrow, to refocus it from the letter business to a parcel and a logistics business and a trust center of the country. We did that without any persuasion of anybody, but we knew that the post office could be repositioned. In part of that detail, without sharing the commercial details of SAPO so that we don't disadvantage them, we have started to make moves, because it's not all post offices that are unprofitable. There are post offices that are very profitable, that are doing very well. But we have started to make moves to say, by 1st of April next year, each branch manager must be both a cost center and a profit center, because the workers of the post office must take responsibility of whether they are making, like any other business, whether they are contributing to the performance and improvement of financial improvement of the post office, or they are contributing to the worsening of the post offices. That's the first move we have done. And we've gone out, visited all the branches of South African post offices out, except what they call the retail centers, which are the small offices. But the branches of the post offices I have visited since I joined this department as a minister. So I don't speak from what I receive as complaints. I know the situation in each post office that I have visited. And again, in that space, we then engage to say, given that the post bank must also take over and have its own branches, which are the branches that the post of a bank must take responsibility for and upgrade quickly so that we continue to give confidence to the people of South Africa. And also we are addressing what we call the broken window syndrome, because there are post offices that should not be dirty because there should be a broom to sweep it. There is water to mop it. It must be clean and people must continue to go to receive services from. But in terms of the plan, and I've said the post office is going to be a trust center of the country and the trust authority of the country, and they've started to position themselves as such, and we're working with them to secure that business of government in its totality. Secondly, the post office.
Thank you very much. We give you up to there. Thank you. The Honorable Pambo.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Minister, aside from the physical destruction of post office infrastructure, for which SAPO has no plans of ever fixing, the biggest destruction has been that inflicted on SAPO as an institution. In September, it was reported at the Portfolio Committee that SAPO had been unable to pay creditors, medical aid contributions, pension fund contributions, and SARS obligations, and that it would remain unable to meet those obligations unless it is recapitalized. What progress has been made towards resolving these financial problems? What steps have been taken to ensure that those responsible for incurring these costs are taken into account, and for ensuring that these problems do not occur again? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. The matter of the recapitalization of the post office has been a priority on our part. We started to engage with the National Treasury last year in terms of what should have been the allocation for. We needed a 1 billion allocation to just assist the post office to move in this current financial year. Unfortunately, when the budget was passed, the post office was not allocated. Post that, we continue to engage with the post office, and the National Treasury on the funding, hoping that an MTBPS will then make a provision for the post office so that because it has to be recapitalized. I'm on record to saying that the post office is not for sale and the sale of post office is not an option. We have opposed the PMTPBS. We had engaged with the Minister of Finance and the Treasury team on finding mechanism to assist or to recapitalize the post office during this period. I am going to Cabinet next week to table our concerns around the matters of the recapitalization of the post office, which will then come to the Portfolio Committee. I want to remind honorable members, is the Parliament that approves the funding, the budget of government, and therefore we are pleading with members of Parliament to ensure that the post office is allocated. The failure of the post office will mean exclusion of SMMEs and the rural poor from the digital economy, and that cannot be an option for us. Thank you.
Thank you. We now proceed to the next question, which is question 811, asked by the Honorable Mdabe to the Minister of Employment and Labor. The Honorable, the Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Thanks for the question, Honorable Mdabe. Well, as you know, we had to fetch the compensation fund from a deep, dark hole. In doing so, we had to come up with all sorts of measures. And part of those measures are the audit action plans. The reality is that the fund is not out of the deep hole, at least not yet, as much as we were very much focused, and we are still very much focused on
dragging it out of the hole. The implementation of the audit action plan has resulted in the restructuring of the compensation fund, which included the expansion of the core business areas and creation of distinct business units. For instance, through the implementation of this audit action plan, the financial management unit achieved the stabilization of the finance unit and capacitation of the unit. The fund has enhanced the SAP financial systems to improve the accuracy of a number of areas of the debtors' records and controls over various revenue processes. And these include segregation of duties and development of creditors module in the claims management system to enable the production of the creditors listings to support the amounts in the financial statements. So these are basic functions, and these basic functions of the finance were lacking in the prior systems and has resulted in the proper accounting of revenue from the exchange transactions. Secondly, implementing of what we call a system ComEasy to manage the claims management progress in the fund has resulted in a number of improvements over the submissions, the processing, and the payment of the medical aid claims in the fund. And these include implementation of the duplicate functionality in the system to prevent payment of duplicates, implementation of the AVS project to validate the banking details and prevent the medical invoices containing invalid entries, duplicated entries, invalid claims from entering the ComEasy system. The control over users who represent medical aid providers in order to protect the integrity of the claims in the system. So in addition to the systems control, the fund has added clinical skills which had been missing in the fund in order to create the capacity to understand the process and process the medical information submitted to the fund in support of the claims. So this has resulted in the creation of a medical services division with occupational health specialists and supported by the medical practitioners in each province. So we've gone further in the implementation of the audit action plans. We've also looked into the improvement of the citizens' experience with the fund. And in this regard, the restructuring of the fund has resulted in the customer services function being separated from the claims unit in order to ensure an overall improved management of the service expectations of all the citizens. And these include expansion of the customer care unit, development and implementation of the customer relations management solution on the SAP, enhancement of the call center tools that citizens use to engage the compensation fund. But of course, there are many other areas that have been created, restructured, and improved, and without going into detail, such as the risk management, anti-corruption and integrity management, employer services, technology improvement, rehabilitation, and so forth. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. The Honorable Mdabe.
Thank you, House Chair, and thank you to the Minister for the response. Minister, the development and the introduction of ComEasy IT system.
Can you raise your voice? Yeah, please closer, go closer. Thank you.
Minister, the development and the introduction of ComEasy IT system, was it also part of the implementation of the audit plan? Thank you.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thanks, Comrade Honorable Mdabe. Yes, the ComEasy was developed to not only enhance the service delivery improvement efforts of the fund, but also to address what we call the control weaknesses that had been identified in the prior claims management systems that the fund has issued. So what we have done as part of our fundamental restructuring of the fund was to look not just at the structure, but to also look at the systems and the IT systems in particular. So definitely it was meant to do that. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. The Honorable Dana.
Thank you, House Chairperson. Honorable Minister, I think the one thing that we have ever probably agreed upon is the fact that indeed the compensation fund is in a very deep, dark hole. And we know the audit action plan has been implemented. We know that skilled resources have been seconded from the private sector in the form of 20 professionals in the accounting and auditing industry. And you've just mentioned a number of other measures that have been implemented, like the fundamental restructuring that you just mentioned in your answer to Honorable Mdabe. My question to you, Minister, is aside from the outstanding information, for instance, that the fund is yet to receive from subsidiaries with regards to investments, is the compensation fund as it is now ready for audit? And if not, barring the reason that I've just mentioned, why not? Thank you, House Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Minister.
Part of what I've talked about, this deep hole, and if we look at a lot of disclaimers which we've received, correctly so, have been linked to the issue of the investments of billions with the PIC. We've written to the PIC and to the chairperson of the PIC and requesting the information in relation to our investment. We've even planned meeting with them. But we have indicated that because this area was responsible for the disclaimer, it would not be wise just to rush and submit when all these issues, and in particular, this particular area, has not been resolved. And we think that given the agreement we've had and the proposal we've made to the AG, by the time we make the submissions, we will be ready with this particular information. It might be part of that information, or it might be the total information which would have received. Because we're talking about a number of companies where the investment has been done through this entity of the PIC. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kado.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, the compensation fund has been a dysfunctional disaster for the last 20 years, marred by maladministration and financial irregularities. Pretty much the only functional link in the occupational injuries and diseases chain is that provided by third-party administrators who pay medical professionals up front and then try to claim, in spite of manifold difficulties, from the fund. Why are you so determined to destroy the one part of the system that actually works? And when will you outsource the compensation fund's functions to a private sector service provider who can actually do the job?
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. Theirs is just to claim money, it's not to run the compensation fund. They do not have that ability to do that. But all they know is to claim more and more money. And we will never outsource that. That's not, we're not in what to call, we don't have any thinking of outsourcing that. We've developed a framework that looks into all the aspects, what we call the hard elements of the strategy, of the structure and the systems. We have also been looking at what we call the soft elements, including the management style, the skills, the staff, and doing a deep skills audit in that particular entity, which is very important because we are running an insurance we're running a financial institution when you're talking about the compensation fund. So we need a different set of the skills. This also includes us looking at the culture of the work ethic in that particular institution. So we're identifying the areas that need realignment, also determining the new organizational design. And also we have also identified what needs to be changed and implement the changes, what some call change management. That needs investment in the change management. Our immediate focus then is stabilizing the financial controls. We're not talking about outsourcing that. That's part of the privatization agenda, which some of you have always been calling for. We're not there, but we have seconded officials from the private sector to come and work with us in terms of dealing with the challenges which are there, who are skilled in these areas.
Thank you. The Honorable Ngobo.
Thank you very much, House Chair, and thanks to the Minister. Minister, we have been made aware of incidents in which doctors are either soliciting bribes from individuals who are genuinely injured or accepting bribes from those who are not in for the issuing of the medical certificates that are required to receive any compensation from the fund. And the question is whether the department is aware of this, and if not, why? And if so, please provide some details. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Ngobo. Whenever there are these allegations of corruption, we don't want to generalize. We normally request that we are given the information so that, specific information so that we can investigate. There are a number of issues which we are investigating. I can tell you, Honorable Ngobo, that we have a forensic audit in the compensation fund as we speak, which is looking into the different areas. If there are doctors who are doing that, we would love that we are favored with such information so that we can make a quick follow-up, and we're ready to do that. We have had different teams which are helping us in doing that, including the Fusion Center, the SIU, and the other institutions, but we're also relying on the forensic auditors to deal with some of the issues. But I must say, Chairperson, and I'm happy that one member talked about 20 years of dysfunctionality. So to move out of that, it's not going to be an event. It is a process, and it's going to take time. We have to be patient, but we have to be accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. We now proceed, honorable members, to question 837, asked by the Honorable Masipa to the Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. The Honorable, the Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member and Honorable Members. Government views the safety and security of rural communities in South Africa as a priority. The seriousness of continued acts of violence against the rural communities cannot be underestimated. It is for this reason that the South African Police Service, working with other government departments, formulated a comprehensive and holistic strategy to support the creation of a safe rural environment and ensure food security. Rural communities contribute to the welfare and prosperity of the country as an economically viable group. Farmers, farm workers, and residents within rural communities are considered soft targets by criminals. This is due to the remoteness of farms, high market value of properties, large distances between farms and villages, and the inaccessibility
to the police as well as basic infrastructure such as roads to support service delivery. Rural police stations are often isolated and responsible to police vast areas. The extent and high levels of poverty and unemployment within our communities also create a particular challenges which all of us, I know, we are grappling with and trying to address. While I've said this, honorable members, it is important for me to also appreciate that given our fiscal situation, but also given that farm workers, farmers, and rural communities are not the only people who are impacted upon by crime, we will not be able to be in a position where we can pay rebates on security equipment which are installed by farmers. But also it will cause challenges of inequity because some of the smallholder farmers and rural communities may not even be able to access such security equipment and therefore not qualify for any form of rebate. But that does not mean one does not appreciate that it is having an impact on our farming and rural communities. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Masipa.
Thank you, House Chairperson.
Mrotsatla, we tibete. Tswalla mo le. Tswela pele pa.
Thank you, House Chairperson. Minister, in September, South Africa has experienced one of the bloodiest months of farm matters. Minister, just using the nominal GDP figure for 2022 of 5.7 trillion rands, a 2.43% contribution of agriculture to GDP, and an estimate of 40,122 farm units as at 2017 in South Africa. The cost of a farm matter or attack to the economy was around estimated at 3.5 million rands per annum. This is on assumption that the attack shall result in a permanent loss of a farming unit. If we then assume that there is going to be temporary loss of productivity of the farming unit, the loss to the GDP is estimated at 400,000 per month. On an annual basis, your department has been reducing budget allocation towards farmers. Furthermore, there has not been an alignment towards tackling the emerging issues that include increased crime on farms and high input costs on production. Minister, will you agree that so far you and the President provided lip service with no financial support towards the farmers while farmers are struggling with high input costs to ensure that South Africans are food secured? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Masipa. I must actually say that from where I sit, it is unfortunate the way you are actually putting your supplementary question on such an important matter. As I've said earlier, nobody underestimates or rather downplays the importance of safety and security of all South Africans, including farmers, farm workers, and rural community. And I think that it's important that all of us appreciate that. Secondly, as you said, there is a contribution that farmers, farm workers, and rural communities, most of whom who are residing close to farms, who work on farms as farm workers, contribute to the economy of this country. The issue of safety and security, which is your primary question, I've indicated what the government is doing to address this issue that you are raising. I don't also think it is important, it is correct for you rather, to say the President and the Minister of Agriculture are paying lip service about the support to farmers. There's a range of support that this government is giving to farmers. One of those relates to market access, in particular when it comes to commercial farmers, where most instances as government, including DECO, including DTIC, we go all out to ensure that our commodities find their way into various markets, which bring revenue, not only to the country, but also to farmers themselves. Therefore, it is not correct, and I wouldn't agree that there has been any lip service paid by the South African government towards taking agriculture and the agricultural economy as an important sector of our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Briett.
Thank you, House Chair. Honourable Minister, farm murders and attacks do not only add to the cost of doing business that ultimately leads to an increase in food prices, but detrimentally affects food production that leads to further food insecurity. You have now answered in terms of what we'll do in terms of revenue, but what steps will you and your department take to ensure that amidst these farm murders and attacks, our commercial and emerging farmers, as well as our rural communities, are protected and that we do not become a further food insecure country as a whole? I thank you.
Thank you. The Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable Briett, for a follow-up question. Again, it would really be like repeating a scratch record, because the matter of safety and security is a matter that cuts across a number of government departments. But there is a lead ministry which actually addresses this matter, which is the Ministry and the Department of South African Police Service. As you know, Department of Safety and Security, working with other departments, particularly my department, the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, have developed a safety and security strategy for rural communities, which includes farms. And I think it's important for us not to, at all times, highlight the issue of farmers as though they are the only ones that are impacted upon by any violent crime or any loss of life. Because for any farm to be effective and to be productive, it requires both the farmer and the farm workers. All of those people are and should be the concern of all of us, including this government. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Inkosi Mandela.
Honorable Chair, I will take the question.
Proceed, ma'am.
Minister, the 2018 Rural Safety Strategy recommends that your department develop legislation that will enhance rural safety within the agricultural communities. What engagements have your department embarked upon to ensure social compact within the agricultural sector so as to improve the well-being of farm workers and labor tenants, especially in instances where the crime in farming communities is committed by farm owners? Thank you.
Thank you. The
Thank you.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Tlape. As you know, that one of the issues that had been raised in looking at the issue of rural safety and what at times are this, the drivers of such issues. It relates, among other things, to issues of land and how the relationship between farm owners and labor tenants and farm workers is, which relates to issues of tenure security, which is, even though it's addressed by the Extension of Security of Tenure Act, you find that most of the time, farm workers get themselves evicted and the department actually intervenes. And we have strengthened that legislation. We continue to monitor to ensure that farm workers are not vulnerable. But we also appeal not only to what government must do, but farmers themselves appreciate that farm workers are an important resource in the production purposes. Secondly, the issue, as I said, of rural safety, we are working with the Department of Safety and Security, but in respect of the Department of Land Affairs, we are looking and reviewing our Labor Tenants Act as well as safety and security. Thank you very much, Honorable Member.
Thank you. Inkosi Kabekulu.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mhlonishwa, kuliqiniso ukuthi zikhona izakhiwo ezimisiweyo ukulekelela ukunqanda ubugebengu nobuxhwanguxhwangu emaplazini okuhlanganisa nemiphakathi yasemakhaya noma imiphakathi leyo yakhe emaplazini nabasebenzi emaplazini. Inselelo ekhona mhlonishwa ukuthi kukhona okuhle okwenziwayo phakathi kwabahlali okanye abasebenzi nabalimi ukubona ukuthi kuyalwa nobugebengu. Kunesimo ke la khona abalimi beqasha ama-security companies ahlukumeza abantu abasemaplazini uma beyovula amacala emaphoyiseni bangasizakali. Chazalini umnyango wakho olubambayo lapho ubona ukuthi aqhubeke lobu bubi obenzakalayo. Ngithokoze.
Thokoze mhlonishwa.
Ngibonge kakhulu Ndabezitha ngombuzo wakho. Uqinisile impela ukuthi zikhona inzame ezenziwa nguhulumeni ezibonakala zinomphumela. Kodwa zisekhona ingqinamba njengoba usho nje. La ufumaniseka khona ukuthi la abazama ukuzivikela abalimi baqasha ama-security companies agcine esehlukumeza imiphakathi ikakhulukazi leyo miphakathi ehlala emaplazini. Siyeke sikwenze ukuthi uma kukhona izimo ezinjalo silekelele leyo mindeni ngokuthi sibatholele abameli ukuze bakwazi ukuthi balekeleleke bathathe lawo macala bawayise ezindaweni ezifanele nezinkantolo ukuze zithathe izinqumo eziyiso. Kodwa okunye esikwenzayo ukuqhubeka ukuthi sibe nokukhulumisana nokuxoxisana kanye nabalimi uqobo lwabo ukuthi kumele kube khona ukuhlalisana ezindaweni zasemaplazini. Kungabi khona ukucwasana ngoba bonke laba bantu banelungelo lobunini mhlaba. Ngiyabonga.
Sibonge ma. Siyaqhubeka, we go to the next question. Question 803. Asked to the Minister of Agriculture and Land Reform and Rural Development, Honorable the Reverend Mishwe. The Honorable the Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chairperson, and thanks to Honorable Mishwe for the question. The Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development regulates the manufacturing, distribution, importation, sale, and use of pesticides in terms of the Fertilizer, Farm Feeds, Agricultural Remedies and Stock Remedies Act of 1947 and its regulations. Protocol for application of pesticides early, the conditions for registration of pesticides as stated on the label in terms of the said act are that aerial applicators are required to notify all inhabitants in the immediate vicinity to the area to be sprayed and issue the necessary warnings. Further, the applicators are legally obliged not to spray over or allow spray draft to contaminate adjacent areas of water. Section 7, subsection 2A of the Act 36 of 1947 provides that no person shall, for reward or in the course of any industry, trade, or business use, recommend the use of any pesticide for a purpose or in a manner other than that specified on the label on container thereof, or describe on such container, or use any agricultural remedy unless he or she is a pest control operator registered in terms of the Act, or otherwise then in the presence and under the supervision of a pest controller so registered. Aerial applicators are required to be registered as pest control operators in terms of Act 36. Yes, according to the conditions to registration as pest control operators and pest control operations regulations, aerial applicators, including farmers, are required to inform residents or human inhabitants living in and around the targeted spraying area of the details of the pesticide to be applied, hazards associated with the product, and all the precautions that must be taken to minimize the risk. You would recall that last year we've had the challenges of locusts in particular provinces, particularly in the Northern Cape, Western Cape, and Eastern Cape, as well as the Free State. Here we have indeed notified, working with our officials, how our farmers and those who are actually a part of the system of ensuring that we deal with these locusts must be able to spray in accordance to the Act, but also notify communities. One of the issues we've also addressed is that where such locusts are closer to residences, whether shops or even homes, that no spraying should be done in the close proximity, because that will have an unintended consequences that is not desirable for communities. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you. Moruti Mishwe.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Human Rights Watch produced a short documentary that exposed how Brazil, which is one of the largest consumers of pesticides in the world, has allowed communities to be poisoned by pesticides that were sprayed near their homes, schools, and workplaces without their government doing anything about it. Affected communities that fear reprisals from wealthy and politically powerful farmers are afraid of speaking out, even when they know from symptoms they see in their family members that they are being poisoned. What is the South African government doing to protect people living in rural communities where spraying of pesticides occur regularly? And what should families that are already adversely affected do to find remedies? Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member Mishra. As I've indicated, that there is legislation in our country that actually protects individuals against such hazardous, elements, pesticides. We also indicate that if you have to do such spraying under what regulations of Act that relates to the control of pesticides as well as their registration. The registrations allow us to know who are the people who have got such pesticides and for what use. We indeed ensure that communities are advised. First, the farmer or anybody, because in some instances, pest controllers are not necessarily farmers. Pest controllers are actually, some of them asked by people to come and do spraying in their homes, of termites and other things. Even themselves, they are supposed to inform their clients about the pesticide they are using, its dangers, as well as its benefits. In instances where members of the community realize that there might have been an impact as a result of a particular pesticide, they have recourse to come to the state. I will just quote again what happened last year in the Eastern Cape. When the locust infestation started, the Department of Agriculture in the province, led by MEC Peters, they actually went on all community radio stations in the Eastern Cape, alerting people as well as advising them about the locust, as well as what are the means that are being used to actually contain them, such as spraying of pesticides, but also what distance should be
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Thank you. Your time has expired. Honorable Mahlo. Honorable Mahlo.
Thank you, Honorable. Thank you, Honorable Chair. To the Minister of Agriculture, what are the legislative gaps, if they are found to be there, that resulted in the use of unregulated chemicals in the pesticide used, and how have they impacted on the crops production and communities around those areas, living in around the targeted spraying areas? And how will the department be undertaking the review of all the legislations drafted
under the apartheid to ensure that it is aligned with our democratic constitutional right or order.
Thank you. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Maslow. Maybe let me say that at the moment, there are no gaps that have been identified in respect of the Stock Remedies Act, which also deals with issues of pesticides as well as fertilizers and farm feeds. However, when there are such gaps that are identified, there is law review that is undertaken and amendment made. So when communities or individuals believe that the current act is not adequate to actually control pesticides as well as other farm feeds and agricultural remedies, it is important that those are brought to the attention of the department so that necessary review is undertaken and amendment legislation is done. Thank you very much, Honorable Member.
Thank you. Ndate Masipa.
Thank you, House Chairperson. Eastern Cape farmers have started complaining about the surge of locust outbreaks with the possibility of even getting worse. The battle to control the swarm is expected to increase. It was allegedly alleged that national parks don't allow the spraying of chemicals in their parks. How is your department, Minister, dealing with national parks in fighting the locust outbreak? And also, which pesticides must the National Institute of Communicable Disease be notified of in case of exposure to said chemicals? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
the
you very
Honorable
much,
Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Masipa, for the question you are asking. Firstly, the statement that you are making. Indeed, we have been observing that there is a surge of locusts in some of the areas, and we are working with relevant stakeholders to make sure that we control them. The engagement between ourselves and national parks is ongoing because indeed, it is important to take into consideration that whatever pesticide that is being used is not only protective to animals, it's also protective to human beings. Seated here, Honorable Member, I may not be able to give the exact name of the pesticides that we have that we need to notify the relevant authorities as you have asked. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Matthias.
Thank you so much, Honorable Chair. Honorable Minister, in 2020, the South African organic sector and the GMO-free zones in South Africa published a report on pesticide drift with specific focus on farmlands, farmyards, and other farming areas here in the Western Cape. This report highlighted the serious health and environmental effects of pesticides drift as a result of aerial spraying. Most of the affected communities are poor people close to these farms. In light of the damning findings, why have you not considered banning aerial spraying of pesticides? Secondly, considering the country's obsession with just transition in order to deal with the effects of climate change, why have you not considered introducing stricter regulations on the use of synthetic fertilizers in order to transition the country's food production to organic farming?
Thank you. The Honorable Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Honorable Member Matthias, for the question you have asked, even though the other question is new that relates to issues of climate change and the use of fertilizer or not, and using other organic fertilizers. The report you are referring to, we are engaging with those relevant parties to also establish what scientific methodologies they've used to come up with the determination that they have put in their report. So that engagement is ongoing between our officials and them. And indeed, where necessary evidence is found, such a pesticide will actually be removed for use in our jurisdiction. With regards to the issues of fertilizers, indeed, as part of climate change adaptation, we are working with the industry to actually ensure that we move towards environmentally friendly use, both in terms of production systems, but also in what we use as inputs in our farms. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. We now proceed to question 812, asked by Honorable Tlhape to the Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. The question as asked by Honorable Tlhape, the answer to it is as follows. Yes, in our endeavor to facilitate better access to finance by Black producers, as a department, we have worked together with other agencies such as the Land Bank and the IDC to have a blended finance scheme that will assist farmers in the various commodities, particularly targeting Black farmers. We also do have other financial support such as Mafisa, which we assist smallholder farmers, and some of those farmers who have benefited from Mafisa scheme are those that are in the sugar industry, particularly small scale sugar producers. We also have got the Agri-BE Fund that assists on enterprise development. So there are initiatives that we are undertaking to make sure that this finance is a bit affordable, because in the blended finance scheme, we put particular category of those resources into a grant and mix it with loans. This ensures that it de-risks the applicants, particularly women and youth who cannot afford the loan that they would ordinarily not qualify for. The scheme is demand-driven. However, of the 7 producers supported by the Land Bank during the proof of concept phase 3, transaction was at 43% male-owned, and 3 transactions were women, and 1 was family-owned transaction. As you know, that with the difficulties in the Land Bank, we could not proceed even after reviewing the scheme when it started, but we have launched it once again this year, and we hope that we will be able to address the challenges of financial support to our farmers. Thank you very much, Honorable Member.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The first supplementary goes to Honorable Tlhape.
Thank you, Chair. Thank Minister for the comprehensive response, especially when it comes to women and youth farmers. Now, Minister, you elaborated on the initiatives within government. Are there any initiatives or plans, perhaps, within the private sector that your department has undertaken to support increasing investment to the emerging agricultural sector in order to boost productivity and help to create the necessary jobs? Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member, for that follow-up question. Firstly, I must indicate that there is private capital, including our financial institution, that goes towards the funding of agriculture in the country. It might be that in terms of the scale of funding to smaller as well as new farmers, it may be limited. You also have got the AGDA, which is the Agricultural Development Agency, which is a combination where farmers and other private sector are also financing agriculture. So there are private sector schemes or entities that are supporting agriculture. Through land development support, we as a department, we are working also with other financial institutions to support farmers, particularly those that have been allocated leases on plus farms. We have been engaged with the 4 financial institutions, our banks, to actually enter into partnership like we've done with Land Bank and IDC on a blended finance scheme. This will not only expand the reach, but also will enable accessibility by a majority of farmers where they are. Thank you very much, Honorable Member.
Thank you. I now recognize Honorable Noko Phineas Masipa.
I think you pronounce it well this time. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Minister, the blended finance that you eloquently spoken about only focused on South Africans that are on land that is already surveyed, which was done by the apartheid government, we all know. Before Ujon Avule Gate for a democratic alliance to union building, can you please tell this House and the millions of rural villagers living on 70 million hectares of land that is registered under Fairwood and Native Land Administration as to how are they going to benefit from the blended finance without any tenure security? I thank you.
Thank you very
Honorable
much.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Masipa. I think you are also touching on another question, which I will respond to, but not now, as you are trying to nudge me, in terms of the registration of communal land in South Africa. But it would also be important that we look at the transitional measures that were put when we transited from the interim constitution to the final constitution, because it will address that issue which we are bringing through the window. However, government even today do fund farmers in communal areas, specifically on the blended finance. In our engagement with the Land Bank, we've highlighted that issue, and there will be funding farmers who come from the communal areas. Government as it stands, it also funds farmers in the communal areas through a range of support measures, the Comprehensive Agricultural Support Program, Ilima Litsima, the other provincial department support, which goes towards supporting farmers in communal areas. So it is not true, rather the perception that farmers in communal areas are not supported. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Mundwedi.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Minister, despite the artificial change in the mandate of the Land Bank, which has given it an ill-defined developmental mandate, the bank still largely remains a commercial bank and is reluctant to fund Black farmers who have no collateral. Have you considered providing government capital to the Land Bank for the sole and exclusive purpose of financing emerging and established Black farmers without asking them for collateral? If not, why not? Thank you very much, House Chair.
Thank you. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I don't think the mandate of the bank when it comes to development is ill-defined. If you look at the legislation of the Land Bank of 2002, it clearly outlines the development mandate of the bank. Yes, we agree that maybe for a number of years, this bank, its portfolio has largely focused on established commercial farmers. Its portfolio when it comes to Black farmers is still very minuscule. And if you have been listening to the chairperson of the Land Bank, Ms. Tabinkosi, she has actually indicated that the bank's focus will now, in terms of its weight, look at the support of Black farmers, particularly women and youth. With issues of the criteria in terms of collateral or no collateral, I think the bank understands the situation of our country and therefore would look at other measures of how it secure the credit that they give to farmers wherever they may be. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Kebekul.
Ngiyabonga Star. Mhlonishwa, empendulweni zakho kuzwakala caca ukuthi cishe umnyango ukhathalele kakhulu ukuphasa nokwelekelela labo abangene emkhakheni wezolimo ngenhloso yokuhweba. Kodwa labo abangena inhloso yokuhweba awuzwakala ucacisa ukuthi qhaza lini olubambayo. Uma ngahlehlela emuva ngesikhathi kulomnyango uphethwe umhlonishwa ungqongqoshe uNkwinti wakhipha ogandaganda kuba bosiza abantu emphathi yasemakhaya belime ukudla bekwazi ukuzondla. Ngabe umnyango wakho kukhona nokwenzayo ke kulekelela lapho njengoba isimo sikhomba ukuthi bayadinga abantu ukondleka ngokudla kunokuba bedayise iy'moba ngiyabonga.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Honorable Minister, you have to wait for me, Honorable Minister. The Honorable Minister, you now recognize.
I'm very sorry, Honorable House Chairperson. Thanks
Go
to
ahead.
you.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. Ngiyabonga kakhulu mhlonishwa ucebekhulu Ndabezitha. Empendulweni ebengiyinikeza bengiphendula umbuzo obuziwe. Ngingasho ke ukuthi kulo mbuzo owubuzayo ukuthi ngabe iziphi izinhlelo ezenziwa nguhulumeni ukuxhasa labo balimi emakhaya abasafufusayo noma emalokishini eindaweni la abantu bengakwazi ukulima khona ukuze bakwazi ukusiphilisa. Njengoba ushilo ke ungqongqoshe uNkwinti kwakungesiyenje kuphela kepha lolu hlelo ayelibeka uhlelo likahulumeni esaqhubeka nalo lokuxhasa abantu emakhaya ngezinto ngezinsiza zokulima njengoba sazi ukuthi yenye yezingxenye yezinto ezenza kube khona ukuthi abantu baye emasimini. Lolu hlelo ke siyesenze izakhiwo la sizothi sifake khona lezi zinsiza kusebenza esizibiza ngama Farmer Production Support Unit. Alekelela ke labo balimi abaseduzane ukuze bonke bakwazi ukuboleka bakwazi ukusebenzisa lezo zinsiza kusebenza ukuze bakwazi ukuthi basizakale. Kanti futhi imali yokuxhasa njengoba ngishilo nje imali esifake kulolu hlelo lithi yilima litsima kumbe abanye ngaphambilini kwakuthiwa sibiyele emasimini bekuyingxenye yokuxhasa labo balimi abasafufusayo abasebenza ukuthi bakwazi ukuziphilisa ukuze nabo bakwazi ukuhlomula. Uhlelo olubekwe umongameli uma sixakene no-COVID i-Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan uPesi bekuwolunye uhlelo olubheke ngqo kulabo abalima noma abafuye imfuyo encane abasebenza ikakhulukazi laba abalimayo endaweni engingathi nje ilingana neground lokudlala kumbe ngaphansi kwaloko. Kumanje nje sigqugquzela nabantu abahlala emadolobheni nasemalokishini ukuthi indawana onayo encane endlini musutshala kuphela utshani namaflower kube kuhle yebo kodwa bona.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Thank you, Masibamba Pemaflawin. Thank you.
Yebo sihlalo.
Question 804 has been asked by the Honorable Sheikh Imam to the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Thank you, members of the House. The question raised by Honorable Imam Sheikh, the department is attending to the question of illegal mining. Though in reality is that we don't have trained officials who must deal with illegal mining because it is a criminal activity. And therefore, illegal mining falls under the scope of the Minister of Police. And I can add that the Zambian Police Service has established a team to deal with, among others, the illicit mining, including organized crime element of this sketch. However, there are measures that we're taking to complement that work. For example, if you take the areas listed there by Honorable Imam Sheikh, you will discover that in the Israel, already 45 holdings has been closed and 22 holdings are being closed. Hence the migration you see from east to western. In addition to that, there are measures that are put in place to deal with illegal miners underground in derelict and ownerless mines, which among others include conducting irregular disruptive operations. For example, if they're underground in a derelict mine, you disrupt possible distribution of food underground. you disrupt electricity, you disrupt water. In that way, you are dealing with illegal miners who are underground in derelicts and ownerless mines. Now, in respect of authorized mining companies are encouraged to ensure that they monitor their own employees not to take food underground for illegal miners. That's why a company like Harmony, for example, has used a strategy of monitoring illegal mining by using biometric to ensure that they monitor the movement of their own employees and interacting with illegal miners. So it is an issue that we're attending to, but our effort complements the work of the police services.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The first supplementary goes to Honorable Sheikh Imam.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Minister, this problem initially, to some extent, has been created by your department, because mining companies who took the cream of the crop left them deserted. The mines were not rehabilitated, but it's been going on for a long period of time. But my concern, Minister, is this. There is a fuel pipeline running right from the east end through to the west end. Explosives are being literally detonated underground, that particular pipeline. And there's tens of thousands of people living alongside that pipeline, which means it poses a great risk that one of these days, if that explosives that are detonated touches that fuel line, tens of thousands of people are going to lose their lives. I agree with you. It's also the responsibility of the police. But the question is, together with the police, mineral resources and energy, who created the problem in the first place in any event, okay, together with other relevant authorities, what I'm asking is, when can we have some appropriate action, or are we going to wait for tens of thousands of people to lose their lives? In the East End, it's estimated there's 20,000 people living underground at any given time. That's how bad the situation is. And I know you're trying, but it's not enough, Minister. Must we wait for a disaster? Can you please tell us what we're going to do as a matter of urgency?
Thank you, Honorable Sheikh Imam. The Honorable Minister.
Quite interesting. When mining companies mine, Sheikh Imam, honorable member of this house, blames the department. But it is companies that mine and take the wealth. And he says, basically, if I take the message from him, he says, don't allow mining companies to mine, because if they are ownerless and derelict, those are the ones that have been left by miners who were mining many years ago and left them open. And that is what we're attending to with the rehabilitation process, particularly the component that is handled by the department. We are dealing with that as a legacy of bad rules and laws of the past, but we're not living them. That's why we gave you a list that every year, with the 140 million rand that is allocated to us, we are closing on the average 40 holdings per annum, including 3 asbestos mines. It will take us as many years because it took 100 years and 30 years to mine. So it can take us long because it took 130 years to mine. So sometimes assuming things that you have never been involved directly to, it's a big problem because you make all sorts of assumptions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I now recognize Honorable Kula.
Honorable Chairperson, I will take the question on behalf of Honorable Kula.
Please go ahead.
Honorable Minister, given that illegal mining is mostly a direct consequence of mining companies that abandon mines after resources have been extracted, leaving behind a major rehabilitation liabilities, and that more than often than not, the department has limited resources to track down mining companies responsible for rehabilitation. Is the crisis linked to illegal mining in Springs and the surrounding areas related to mining companies that closed operation without complying with rehabilitation? What is being done to ensure that the financial provision in ring fencing is ring fenced to use that if mining companies fail to rehabilitate the environment. The department can access that money and carry out rehabilitation itself.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Honorable Minister.
The provision for rehabilitation is what has been created by the MPRDA. In other words, it's a modern day intervention by this government. Before this government, there was no provision at all. So when we are getting the allocation to rehabilitate derelict and ownerless mines, we are actually dealing with the legacy, having gone through. Currently, operational mines are having an obligation and a duty by law to make provision for rehabilitation. That's why many of them undertake concurrent rehabilitation as they are mining. So our problem is that we deal with old mines that were left and the allocation that we're getting, the 140 million, I mean, maybe that the Minister of Finance is here. He may see that the pressure is on us to get more allocation so that we can increase the volume of work we do.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I now recognize Honorable Lorima.
Chairperson, I'll be taking this question on behalf of Honorable Lorimer.
And you are?
Sorry, Chair.
Go ahead.
Chairperson, I want to start by noting that it's never Minister Mantashe's responsibility for anything, is it? Either it's the President or Minister Gordon, or in this case, Minister Kele, who should really answer the question. Anyway, given that this government has decided to address the problem of illegal mining through the Economic Infrastructure Task Team, it will be necessary for that team to have specialist mining knowledge to effectively prosecute mine crime. What formal structures has the minister set up to ensure that this task team has easily available access to expertise from the Mineral Resources Department? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Honorable Minister.
The responsibility of the department is mining, not illegal mining, formal mining. It is explore, and let me give you the value chain of mining. It is exploration, it's mining engineering, and it is metallurgical work. That is the value chain. That is the responsibility of this department. Thieves are not the responsibility of this department. It is the responsibility of the police. Whether they steal gold, even if they steal gold, or they steal maize, or they steal money, or they use drugs, that is the responsibility of law enforcement. Now, as the police deal with this matter, we are working with them. For example, let me give you an example. The Council for Geoscience has developed a gadget that monitors the movement of illegal mining. They are taking that gadget, use it alongside with the police. So our work is to complement the work of the police when it comes to illegal mining. Our focus is on formal mining. That's why when we train artisanal miners, we're not training artisanal miners because we want to convert illegal miners into artisanal miners. We are training artisanal miners to develop skills to mine marginal deposits of mines. And therefore, they are not the same. I explained to one member in the committee that if you take illegal mining, majority of the people who come out of illegal mining are not South African citizens because they are thugs, they come to the country, they come to steal the mine, and that is a crime. And therefore, mining is not dealing with crime. It's not equipped to do that. That's why we must lean on the police to deal with crime.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Madokwe.
Thank you, House Chairperson. Minister, the problem of illegal mining has been reported.
Honorable Madokwe, just pause. Honorable Khadebe and Honorable McPherson. I cannot hear that member who was asking a question, who's on the, you do not respond. Go ahead, Honorable Madok.
Thank you, House Chairperson. Minister, the problem of illegal mining has been reported for years, and the government did not do much until there were violent and life-threatening consequences. Some of the challenges or the contributors to illegal mining are the delays in your department in responding to reports of illegal mining by communities as they start, and also putting in place monitoring of mining companies that have left these areas unrehabilitated and without securities, not legacy mines. So what have you done to follow up with your regional offices and also to track these mining companies to make sure that they do proper closure, rehabilitation, and put in place securities? And in the place of illegal mining, rehabilitate the environment and the infrastructure? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Madok. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson and honorable members. This is one issue that we always exchange words with Honorable Madok. Honorable Madok is a great representative of illegal miners. And she sees illegal miners as a consequence of poverty in South Africa. But people who come across from Lesotho with heavy firearms are not South Africans. And though that gold doesn't end up in South Africa, it ends up in syndicates. And that's why we always emphasize the fact that illegal mining is a criminal activity, is actually an attack on the economy. And therefore it must be dealt like that. And if you report illegal mining in an area, you report in the region of the DMRE. The region of the DMRE will go to the police and report that incident because it is a criminal activity. Actually, many of these illegal miners are heavily armed, and therefore you don't wear your tie and go and deal with them. You are going to die. That's why it is a criminal activity. It must be dealt with that, and it's a serious attack on the economy. And that's all we must do. And therefore, if you say the department should have taken a report, if you report to the department, we'll take it to the police because it is a criminal activity.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Question 813 has been asked by the Honorable PMP Modise to the Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair. The Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment is the leading implementer of the Forestry Sector Master Plan, working in collaboration with other role players. Most of the jobs to be created fall under the primary production category, and others will be created in the downstream processing industries. The jobs aligned to primary production are dependent on the afforestation program and the transfer of category B and C plantations, including the recommissioned areas in the Western Cape. The afforestation program requires a license in terms of provisions of the National Water Act of 1998, the National Environment Management Act of 1998, and the Conservation of Agricultural Resources Act of 1993. The processes of obtaining such licenses are time-consuming and must be completed prior to the commencement of the implementation of the new afforestation program. The transfer of the plantations has to undergo consultations with communities and affected parties where models of transfer are proposed and agreed upon. These processes have been concluded and the transfer processes can be implemented accordingly. In terms of job creation, in the first year of implementation of the master plan, 4,644 jobs were created through industry initiatives and 1,593 through government initiatives aligned to the expanded public works program. The total number of jobs amounts to 6,237. In terms of the afforestation program, Our department has since put in place measures to streamline the afforestation licensing processes. Parcels of land totaling 30,000 hectares have been collated for development and will undergo environmental impact assessment studies so that these areas can be licensed and plantations established. In addition, to achieve the master plan target of 151,000 hectares under cultivation, the department will employ the use of what we call Environmental Management Program R, so that the authorizations will not be done in a piecemeal approach, but will be dealt with holistically. The EMPR will allow for bigger areas to be processed and to facilitate the streamlining of authorizations. For the category B and C plantations and the exit lease areas in the Western Cape, a catch-up plan has been developed jointly with affected stakeholders and is being implemented. This will accelerate the transfer of the category B and C plantations and unlock additional jobs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Modise, as a response to the first supplementary.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Greetings to yourself, greetings to the Minister and honorable members. Minister, given the importance of the forestry supply, the value chains and the concerns around climate change, how effective is the forestry master plan in dealing with issues of climate change, mitigation and adaptation plans in line with the climate change bill? And how will the implementation of the climate change bill impact the job growth opportunities within the forestry sector? Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I think that it's important to recognize that we are talking about commercial plantations, where on the whole, we are utilizing what would be regarded as alien rather than indigenous species. And obviously, many of these species require considerable amounts of water for cultivation. It is for this reason that when we reviewed the category B and C plantations, we did also give attention to the issue of planting of catchments of forests in catchment areas, because we recognize that one of the complexities, particularly in the Western Cape, is that we are likely to an exacerbation of drought conditions. And in certain sensitive areas, we have actually reduced the number of hectares that would be cultivated. In this sense, we are trying to, on the one hand, stimulate the forestry sector and the jobs that it can create, and on the other hand, balance issues such as scarce water resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Now recognize Honorable Bryant.
Chair, unfortunately, I will speak for him.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Minister, thousands of forestry jobs have been lost due to the coordinated land invasions in Grabouw, which, according to news reports, were allegedly facilitated by some local members of the Good Party. The SAPS recently told our portfolio committee that the sheriff of the court was in fact actively prevented from intervening in the invasions last year at the 11th hour by representatives of the Department of Public Works, and that this is allowed the invasions to continue. Minister, do you have any further information regarding exactly who prevented the sheriff from acting last year? And is your department providing the SAPS with all available evidence regarding those responsible for the coordinated land invasions?
Thank you. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. As you will recall, when we discussed this matter in the Portfolio Committee, our department did indicate that we had supplied the South African Police Services with all information that we have regarding those involved in the land invasions. And we had, I think that our enforcement unit had also done some collection of information. I'm not in a position to comment on who may or may not have been involved in this information, in these invasions, but I can say that we have handed over all relevant information to the South African Police Services. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. At this point, the time allocated for question has been exhausted, but we'll proceed with the last two supplementary questions. I now recognize Honorable Paulson.
Thank you so much, Honorable Chair. I'll take this question on behalf of Commissar.
Go ahead.
Minister, now the Eastern Cape forestry plantations have been transferred to conservation authorities and communities. What is the post-transfer transport? What is the post-transfer support that the department will provide for communities to derive economic, social, and environmental benefits? And how will these benefits be monitored? Linked to this is the whole ownership, management, and control of wetlands areas in places such as Mkanyakude, wetlands authorities such as in Kanyakude. What measures do you take in place and to ensure that communities around those benefit from wetlands, including forestry plantation areas? Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much. And I suppose the specifics of the Mkanyakude situation could be regarded as a separate question. But let me say, honorable members, that a fundamental principle of conservation in our country is that there has to be beneficiation of local communities, and the conservation estate has to find ways in which local communities can benefit from the existence of a conservation estate. Otherwise, we fully understand that there would be no sustainability of that conservation estate. Let me say, with regard to forestry that has been handed over to communities, the idea is that there should be partnerships with commercial growers who would assist in replanting the plantations and who would also be in a position to offer an offtake to communities once the forests have fully grown, so that throughout the life cycle of the trees, there is support to the new owner growers, and once the process is completed, there's also opportunities for offtake agreements so that there should be a ready-made market. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I now recognize Honorable Singh.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Still in Egypt, Honorable Minister. Saw you this morning on television. Now, Honorable Minister, you would know that ever since you've become Minister of this department, I've expressed, or you've heard me express concern about the existence of this branch and the amount of money that we spend to retain this branch. Because I've always spoken about rapid transfer of property to
there's no email here.
To community. Now, having said that, Honorable Minister, yesterday when we dealt with the BRRR and we were looking at some of the targets set by the department and the targets achieved, for example, on economic transformation and job creation, 66% only were achieved. Education, skills and health, 43% achieved. Social cohesion and safe communities, 32% achieved. Now, this is a real uphill battle that you have, Honorable Minister. What accelerated plan will be executed to ensure that as swiftly as possible, we can bring the state-owned forest into the land of communities and commercial farmers who will assist them in maintaining these farms?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Singh. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Singh. I think that we have debated extensively in our portfolio committee under performance by different branches. And obviously, we've given significant information to the portfolio committee on how we intend to deal with aspects of underperformance, including where necessary, consequence management. But I think with regard to the forestry area, what I explained in the main question is that we are now fast tracking the parceling out of land, and we're doing this through ensuring that we deal piecemeal with environmental authorizations and also with water use licenses. And I've also explained how in the Western Cape we've got a focused catch-up plan, because I think that we are very concerned that this process, as you say, has been subject to considerable delay. And obviously this delay undermines the possibility that those who are urgently in need of the livelihoods that forestry can provide them with are not having access to those livelihoods. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, as indicated earlier, the time allocated for questions has expired. Outstanding replies received will be printed in the answered. We now proceed to the motion on the order paper. The next item on the order paper is a motion in the name of the Chief Whip of the Majority Party. I now recognize the Honorable Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Thank you very much, House Chair, and the members of this august House. I move that the House suspend Rule 290 subsection 2A, which provides inter alia that the debate on the second reading of a bill may not commence before at least 3 working days have elapsed since the committee's report was tabled for the purpose of conducting second reading today on the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill. I so move, Honorable House Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Chief Whip. I now put the motion. Are there any objections? None agreed to. The Secretary will read the first order.
Consideration of report of Standing Committee on Appropriations on Division of Revenue Amendment Bill.
I now recognize the Honorable Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, I move that this report be adopted by the House. Thank you.
The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections?
House Chair, please note the objection of the EFF.
Objection from the EFF
Please.
noted.
Please note the objection of the FF plus, Chair.
FF plus follows and objection is noted. Thank you. And their report is
And
agreed to.
My system is freezing and the UDM, Chair, sorry.
We also note the freezing objection from the UDM and the report is therefore agreed to. The second order. The Secretary will read the last order of the day.
Division of Revenue Amendment Bill.
I now recognize the Honorable N.S. Butelis.
Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Ministers, Honorable Deputy Ministers, Honorable Members, fellow South Africans, the African National Congress supports the 2022 Division of Revenue Amendment Bill. Having celebrated the birthday of Comrade Oliver Tambo and Comrade Steve Chwete in October and November respectively, allow me to dedicate this Division of Revenue Bill to these revolutionaries, leaders and commanders of Umkhonto weSizwe, the People's Army. This is so because with this Division of Revenue, the ANC-led government is continuing with the struggle they pursued, the struggle to liberate our people from the chains of poverty, landlessness, and economic inequality. Capture the interconnectedness of racial oppression and economic exploitation. Comrade Oliver Tambo observed, I quote, racial discrimination, South Africa's economic power, its oppression and exploitation of all the Black people are part and parcel of the same thing, unquote. In other words, the two cannot be divorced. Despite the negative external supply shocks, which impact negatively on the economy, as evidenced by slowing down of economic growth from 1.9% to negative 0.7%, the country was still able to collect more than budgeted for revenue. This is mainly due to the windfall from commodity prices. Honorable Mantashe, thank you. Inflation bracket creep and enhanced productivity at SARS. This has allowed government to allocate funds to deal with the pressing socioeconomic needs and reduce debt. A welcomed development indeed. DORAP is making an additional allocation of 48.889 billion rand to the budget presented to the Minister of Finance at the beginning of the year. Underline, honorable members, is something which is added on the money that was already allocated. It's new money. This takes the allocated funds from 1.975 trillion rand to 2.025 trillion rand. Yes, over 2 trillion rand. These are in-year changes, meaning for this fiscal year. Also, honorable members, the fiscal outlook going forward is improving. Over 2023 MTF, we are starting to see the shifting of resources from national to provincial and local government. While national resources remain stagnant, provincial resources increase by an annual average rate of 2.8% and local government by 6%. At the same period, we are seeing an increase of the provincial equitable share by 2.4% and provincial conditional grants increase of 4.3%. The local government equity share and municipal conditional grants increase on average by 7.8% and 3.6% respectively. Note, honorable members, that these increases happen without any proposed reductions in the 2022 MTBPS, meaning that what the minister presented at the beginning of the year. This is important because there is no robbing Peter to pay Paul scenario here. Even the hardest to please in this house will agree that this is indeed a good story to tell. In fact, the Financial and Fiscal Commission, an independent institution, seeing this, commented about improving fiscal position and said, I quote, "This reflects government's commitment to fiscal discipline, consistent with its fiscal stance in ensuring fiscal credibility and sustainability," unquote. The next question, honorable members, is where will this money be used? These resources are allocated to health, education, infrastructure, disaster response, among others. This is in line with government's commitment to a better life for all, by provision of better health and education of its citizens, especially the most vulnerable sectors of our society, women, rural people, and the children. My comrades will say more about our interventions on early childhood development allocation. This is critical as it is the foundation of the society we are building. Infrastructure spending is critical for service delivery, economic growth, business opportunities, employment creation, and revenue collection. Even more important is the ability of government infrastructure to attract private sector investment so that both public and private sector can grow the economy. Unfortunately, gross fixed capital formation, that is a fixed investment by both public and private sector, has either been very sluggish and even contracting over the years. We are far below the 30% investment to GDP envisaged in the NDP. We are correcting this situation from our side. Honorable members, over the medium term, as Honorable Kodongwana announced, I quote, government's consolidated spending on building new and rehabilitating existing infrastructure will increase from 66.7 billion rand in 2022-23 to 112.5 billion rand in 2025-26. This shows a doubling on this spend within 3 years. This will be used to build roads, bridges, stormwater system, public buildings, etc. Underlining the centrality and importance of infrastructure, the President, His Excellency Ramaphosa, shared with this House that, quote, "Through innovative funding and improved technical capabilities, we have prioritized infrastructure projects to support economic growth and better livelihoods, especially in energy, roads, and water management," I quote. We are walking the talk, and this must be supported by all those who care about our people. What is happening, honorable members, fellow South African, is that this also involves rural infrastructure projects. There's an additional funding for rural bridges program. This is the Weli Sizwe project, which is implemented in collaboration with SNDF. This is critical for our children who brave overflowing rivers in pursuit of education. The bill makes additional funds to respond to unfortunate disasters that occurred in the Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, and Northwest provinces. More will be said about the 3.3 billion rand added to the municipal disaster recovery grant and 1 billion rand to the roads maintenance grant. Honorable members, allocation of funds is half the solution. These funds should be utilized The committee is deeply concerned by failure of some departments, provinces, municipalities to spend money. It is an issue that was also raised by COSATU. Honorable members, as we think how we'll vote on this bill, let's remember the little ones who need the nappies and those children who must cross overflowing rivers, people who are staying in shelters and teachers, and the nurses who will be supported by DORAP 2022. The African National Congress supports the 2022 Division of Revenue Amendment Bill. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Buthelezi. I now recognize Honorable De Villiers.
Thank you, Chair. The Division of Revenue Amendment Bill comes this year together with the medium-term budget policy statement. Most of the changes in the bill are necessitated by disaster response requirements and technical amendments required to shift disaster response funding between municipalities and provinces. However, the scale of disasters in South Africa are such that a total of 695 million rand of newly allocated money has had to be allocated to replenish funding, as most disaster relief funds have been depleted halfway through the financial year. This raises serious questions about the status and use of the Contingency Reserve Fund. Over the past several years, the Contingency Reserve Fund, which is meant for circumstances such as unforeseen disasters, was used continuously to bail out failing state-owned enterprises or SOEs. Additionally, 117 million rand is now allocated to rehabilitating schools damaged by flooding, 1 billion is allocated to repair roads damaged by flooding, and 3.3 billion rand is allocated to municipalities to repair infrastructure damaged by flooding. The combination of climate change combined with the ANC's failure to invest in infrastructure maintenance creates a toxic mix that will continue to endanger the lives and livelihoods of South Africans. The Fiscal and Finance Commission has noted that the funding for this disaster relief is in the form of conditional grants, but that this is an after-the-fact emergency measure. The FFC has previously implored the government to create a system of performance-based grants that can encourage municipalities to both invest in infrastructure maintenance as well as climate change mitigation. I hope that, going forward, the Commission's recommendations aren't ignored. Multiple DA speakers have raised alarm bells over the years that depleting the contingency reserve year in and year out for bailouts will damage the government's ability to respond to disasters effectively. Yet, here we are, in a set of circumstances where there is not enough money available for disaster relief. It is high time that the Finance Minister draws a line in the sand and ring-fences the Contingency Reserve Fund and allows it to grow year on year so that the country can attend to unforeseen disasters. The DA calls on the Finance Minister to end the annual abuse of the contingency reserve so that in the event of future disasters, there is funding readily available and citizens don't need to wait months to recover their livelihoods and rebuild. When one considers the bigger picture, it is disturbing that trends in successive division of revenue bills continue to drain provinces of money. And in the medium-term budget, this is only going to get worse, as allocations will only grow 2.8%, while inflation remains stubbornly high. Provinces are delivery mechanisms for health and education. They pay our teachers and nurses, and continuous cuts to provincial allocations are forcing provinces to cut back on paying salaries. This is not sustainable. Furthermore, public sector capital investment is lagging and is far below the 20% target set in the NDP. The national government's squeeze on funding for provincial and local government is destroying infrastructure. Lastly, it must be noted that up and down the country, where there have been no flooding or disasters, hundreds of thousands of citizens are battling to get a reliable water supply or electricity. The only disaster they face is the ANC government, which systematically destroys infrastructure through corruption and neglect. I quote, "This rot is across the board. It is not confined to any level or any area of the country. Almost every project is conceived because it offers opportunities for certain people to make money. A great deal of the ANC's problems are occasioned by this. These are not my words, but the words of former President Moslante, which illustrates the first core problem citizens are facing. But there is a second problem, and that is that at every level, every project is conceived because it offers an ANC politician an opportunity to cut a ribbon. So projects require an audience to create the illusion of delivery. But in the background, the bulk infrastructure, dams, substations, water treatment plants are collapsing because local ANC politicians cannot cut ribbons and national ministers can't get adoring crowds and good photo opportunities. The DA accordingly cannot support the Division of Revenue Bill until these two defects ending mass corruption and conceptualization of projects and the failure to maintain and build new infrastructure becomes the major focus of funding allocations. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable De Villiers. I now recognize Honorable E.N. Tlangwini.
Thank you very much, House Chair. House Chair, the EFF rejects the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill tabled by the Minister of Finance. The amendment bill seeks to accommodate unforeseen, unavoidable expenditure, rollovers, and other adjustments. We do not reject the amendment bill because of these changes, House Chair, but we reject the bill as we did earlier this year because of the Division of Revenue in its current form is nothing but a tool to perpetuate apartheid. We can say that the National Treasury is using the Constitution and the money bills legislation to perpetuate racist partial planning. White areas continue to receive water and electricity. Their roads are cleaned and well maintained, while townships and informal settlements are living in a pigsty. It is shocking that more than 25 years into the so-called democracy, we still have areas dominated by white people only, for them to receive service delivery when our people drink water with animals. But let's deal with the misguided Division of Revenue Bill, and the EFF have raised this every time this bill is before Parliament. The assumption that the local government will raise its own revenue from sale of water, electricity, and will charge property taxes. The problem is that more than 50% of our population lives in poverty. More than 11 million people are unemployed, and you have more than 18 million depending on social grants. The only municipalities that have capacity to raise their own revenue is that of metros and maybe a few local municipalities that have some form of economic activities. The rest of the municipalities are not viable and will never have the capacity to raise their own revenue. So the idea that we can allocate 10% of the revenue collected nationally to municipalities that are dysfunctional, cannot raise revenue, and do not have the capacity to service delivery is foolish, Honorable Chair. Now, let's deal with the different crises that are facing our country and the capacity to threaten the country's social stability. There are more than 10 million poor households in the country. The Constitution and legislation make provision for all of these families to receive free water, electricity, and sanitation. There's a grant that is available for municipalities to deliver these services. But we have households that do not have access to free water, electricity, sanitation because municipalities do not have a budget. We now know that municipalities are not delivering these services. We know that the National Treasury deliberately rely on outdated information as far as 2016 to make the budget for the indigenous household not to be increased. That is criminal. People of Bloemhof in Ward 3, Liquida, Tamea local municipality live in raw sewage every day because the municipality does not have the practical and implement policy for free basic service. People of Sheshego, Minister, you would know, of Ward 13 in Polokwane do not have water because while the number of the population is increasing, the grant for free basic services is not increasing. We don't need some changes to division of revenue if we are not going to change how we allocate resources in a more way that is away from the apartheid fiscal policy. We need to change the whole fiscal policy, including the division of revenue bill. Municipalities must get majority of the revenue raised nationally because they are the cold face of service delivery. But this is not enough to turn around the collapse of municipalities. We need to expropriate land without compensation, Minister. We still need massive industries to create millions of jobs. We need to abolish tenders to build capacity in municipalities. But furthermore, Minister, you and your team must make it a point to go to all of these municipalities as far as Alfred Nzo and KZN to see that the monies that you have allocated to these municipalities, they are being used for the rightful reason. Because even today still, it's still on the news that flood victims are still not having houses. So you and your team must make it a point. Let's stop the desktop approach to giving funds to our communities. Let's be on the road and going and seeing that these people are receiving the allocations that we are approving as this parliament, but we will be rejecting the division. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Ntlangweni. I now recognize the Honorable Inkosi Mboteles.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, and special greetings to the chairpersons of the committee, Sheng. When the floods hit KZN and Eastern Cape, the government announced huge sums of money to assist those affected. After the announcement, many people on the social media recommended that these funds not be given to county departments, but to organizations such as the Gift of the Givers. This was an indictment to the ruling party and revealed a clear distrust towards the ANC-led government by the people. It further showed that the ANC-led government is known to be corrupt, embezzling taxpayers' money, stealing from the poor and the most vulnerable. These huge sums of money that have been allocated to various causes is done so in hope that it will benefit the people. All services that should be afforded to people as per their democratic right have been crippled and not realized. We hold our breath in anticipation, Chair, that this money is directed to where it should go, targets are met, and that people reap the reward. The amount of grants awarded to different projects as a form of relief speaks volume of the government preparedness to have countered the effects of occurrences such as the floods. The government has to realize that people who were affected by the floods in KZN and Eastern Cape needs places to stay urgently, as they are currently staying in buildings with no form of security or access to proper services which they need on a daily basis. We still hope that the allocation of bulk of the money being invested in infrastructure is one that will be achieved. We have been at a disadvantage where money has been allocated to infrastructure, yet we still have poor, fragile and unmaintained infrastructure with millions of rands going down the drain because of the government's inability to responsibly use the money for what it was intended for. Honorable Chairperson, when money is moved, it should not be done without a reflective measure from municipalities. We have all seen and heard the dire conditions of schools and housing in rural areas, even with funds that have been allocated to them before. It's important, therefore, that control measures goes far beyond just focusing on spending the money. Quality assurance measures have to be implemented to ensure that quality services are provided, not substandard work. The lack of such measures create a loophole for corruption and embezzlement of funds by both unscrupulous politicians and officials, which is something we've been privy to. It is disheartening, Chairperson, to know that state-owned entities have again been allocated money as a bailout with little to no progress being made from the previous sums of money that they were given. We can't keep on providing these entities with millions and still have no progress in their functionality. Recognition, Chairperson, is given to the importance of energy and transport sector in the economy's progress. However, these entities have not made any form of contribution to the people, yet they are constantly being allocated money as a bailout. The marginalization of economic recovery and inclusion strategies of informal and township economy in the bill is not well received, Honorable Chair. These economies are the economic hub of our communities and therefore need some sort of support by government as they support and serve many of our people. We need an environment that will foster high growth, and their inclusion in allocation of funds will be the push that they need. The IFP do support the report and they're not reject it as this is into a way to share. So I support the bill.
Thank you, Honorable Buthelezi. I didn't hear the last part. I now recognize Honorable T. Briet.
Thank you, Honorable House
Sorry,
Chair.
Honorable Briet. Wag 'n bietjie. Vat die stoel asseblief. Dankie. Ons wag vir hulle tot hulle stil is. Go ahead, Honorable Briet.
Dankie, agbare huisvoorsitter. Voorsitter, een van die hoof fokusareas vir hierdie verdeling van billike aandeelwysigingswetsontwerp is om addisionele fondse beskikbaar te stel om te verseker dat die nood in die provinsies wat deur rampe, onder andere die mees onlangse vloed getuister is, aan te spreek. Dit is belangrik om toe te sien dat die infrastruktuur wat nie net skade gelei het nie, maar weggespoel het, so spoedig moontlik herstel en herbou word. Dit is egter van kardinale belang dat daar meganismes in plek gestel word om te verseker dat hierdie fondse nie soos die COVID-19 fondse verkwansel word en in die sakke van 'n paar politieke elite opeindig nie. The Parliamentary Budget Office, however, made a very important point with regard to disasters. They mentioned that while the 2022 MTBPS proposed 6.1 billion rand in disaster relief funding, government should work more on its preparedness and responsiveness to disasters. Taking the current rate of disasters into account, this is very good advice. Dit is nou goed en wel dat daar prioriteit gegee word aan hierdie provinsies wat nou dadelik hulp nodig het, maar die ander provinsies en munisipaliteite met hulle onderskeie probleme en uitdagings het nie weggegaan nie en moet nie op die agtergrond geskuif word nie. Die infrastruktuur in hierdie provinsies is in net so slegte toestand en kan hulle nie bekostig om nie herstel of in stand gehou of opgradeer te word nie. The South African Institute of Civil Engineering has published its 2022 infrastructure report card, painting a bleak picture of the state of roads, rail, water, and other infrastructure in the country. In this report, SAICE found that infrastructure in South Africa is in crisis. South Africa's overall infrastructure rating was a D, indicating that infrastructure is not coping with normal demand and is poorly maintained. This picture becomes more bleak when looking at municipal and provincial infrastructure, especially roads, sanitation, and water infrastructure. It was found that the quality of wastewater treatment is declining, increasing the risk of disease transmission in downstream communities. A lack of waste collection may lead to disease, blockage of drainage systems, and general decline in urban and rural landscapes. Furthermore, secondary and tertiary road networks are deteriorating rapidly, compromising road safety. It was also found that most provincial roads are substandard and the situation is deteriorating fast. I saw an article a few weeks back that said South Africa has 1 million more potholes than 5 years ago. As a Free Stater, I can attest to this. We do not drive on the left of the road, we drive on what is left of the road. Om die algehele prentjie van munisipaliteite landwyd te kyk, is geweldig kommerwekkend. Sommige inligting beweer dat in die laaste dekade munisipaliteite wat hulself in finansiële moeilikheid bevind, vanaf 10 na 90% gestyg het. Verder het die OG bevind dat daar 'n spoedige verlaging in die funksionering van munisipaliteite landwyd is. Ons sien dit in ons meer landelike munisipaliteite waar watertoevoer nie die reël is nie, maar die uitsondering op die reël. Riool in strate en in parke daarenteen is nie die uitsondering nie, maar die reël. SALGA se aanbeveling dat enige verdere reddingsboei aan Eskom ook munisipale skuld in ag moet neem, is kommerwekkend. Die regering is besig om 'n kultuur van wanbetaling te skep. Die regering leer tans alle staatsbeheerde entiteite dat hulle dood eenvoudig net bakkant kan staan en die staat sal voorsien. Die belastingbetaler is op die ou einde die persoon wat vir hierdie kultuur gaan moet pa staan. Dit is onregverdig en onaanvaarbaar. But Chairperson, I conclude, we can shift funds from here to there. We can rename grants from this to that. We can promise things now and just now. But what we need now is action, not words. I thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize Honorable Swart.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, the ACDP notes that the net effect of these adjustments is an increase in the 2023 budget allocation by 48.8 billion. And this bill proposes additional funding for the reconstruction and rehabilitation of provincial municipal infrastructure damaged by the December and April floods, which includes schools, roads, and other infrastructure. Additional funding is also to be provided for the protection and care of flood victims, which will be used for the provision of formula, disposable nappies, the provision of meals, and the payment of shelter-based social workers and social worker supervisors. The ACDP is, however, concerned that disaster relief funds did not reach flood victims in time. In August, 2.2 billion rand in flood relief for victims was approved, but very little was paid to service providers. This issue was highlighted by the ad hoc committee on flood disaster relief and recovery, which was of the view that much more needed to be done for flood victims, as many were still living in unacceptable conditions in temporary accommodation. This issue is also referred to in the report before us today. The medium-term budget policy statement also indicated that provincial and municipal governments are facing pressures from rising costs and basic services and social services over the medium term. This is a result of fiscal constraints and funding from other sources being affected by weak economic growth. Now, the ACDP shares deep concerns that almost 90% of municipalities required support and intervention from national and provincial governments. This due to cost pressures, high levels of corruption accompanied by gross incompetence and financial mismanagement. House Chair, this is a shocking indictment, as it is at the local government level where basic services such as water, sanitation, electricity reticulation, roads and community services should be provided. Sadly, this is not in the case in many municipalities, which has resulted in service delivery protests. Now, while National Treasury will be allocating additional funds, many municipalities are in a shocking financial state, and this appears to have been ongoing for a number of years, and we see continual turnaround strategies, but very little is being done to address dysfunctional municipalities. Municipalities now owe Eskom a staggering 53 billion rand. Can these municipalities be entrusted to spend the additional funds allocated in this bill in line with the Municipal Finance Management Act? The ACDP has severe doubts, and for this reason cannot support this bill despite its good intentions. I thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize Honorable Nkwangwa.
Thank you, Chair. Chairperson, the South African economy continues to struggle, especially from the effects of COVID-19. Although there are some interventions which have been made by government to try and reignite growth, we want to put it on record that we do not believe that even the medium-term budget policy statements and other interventions that were made in the past have been enough to try and reignite the South African economy. Poverty, as you know, has reached levels not seen for more than a decade, while inflation, as we understand it now, has increased to a 13-year high. In fact, if one were to consider some of the key development challenges facing South Africa as cited by the World Bank, one of the issues that this country faces is that the percentage of the population living below the upper middle income country poverty line fell from 68% to 56% between 2005 and 2010, but has since trended slightly upwards to 57% in 2015, and is projected to have reached 60% in 2020, which we have already exceeded. In other words, measures that have been put in place have not been enough to try and cushion the poor from the effects of poverty. In fact, what the government has done has tended to deal with poverty in a very fragmented approach instead of a very comprehensive one. Indeed, we agree with our colleague from the Freedom Front Plus when they say that the state of infrastructure in country is very dire. In fact, she is quite correct in saying, even on our roads, we do not drive on what is left of, we do not drive on the left-hand side of the road, but we drive on what is left of the road, which is a problem in our country. We welcome the review of the conditional grant system concerning infrastructure development, building capacity, and providing operational support. But our concern is that even as we review systems, as we change the municipal grants, what does not happen is that the performance is not good and impactful. Earlier, we listened to the Deputy Minister of Finance saying the Treasury does not have the capacity to monitor the work of municipalities and to check how many of those municipalities have clean or bad credit records. In fact, we are of the view that it should be the responsibility of Treasury to cluster municipalities according to their performance and continually review performances and make sure that capacity building programs are put in place in order to ensure that these municipalities are able to spend the grants that are allocated to them, but also roll out services to our people. It is unforgivable, Chairperson, that even now, at the time of the flood relief funding, as it was given, it did not reach victims on time. Regularly, when we went around the country, especially in affected provinces, we would listen to speeches, nice sounding speeches in the House of funding that had been allocated to relief funding that had been allocated to victims, but a couple of months later, funding had not actually reached the intended recipients due to the level of bureaucracy that you have on our system, in government rather. It is also—
The honorable member's time has expired. Thank you, Honorable Ngwangu. And
Okay.
now the opportunity now goes to the ATM. I have no name next to the ATM. The ATM. Locked. Honorable Heron.
Yes, thank you, House Chair. House Chair, South Africa is a country in which disasters will often be a death sentence for many, as a lack of access to basic services is an obstacle to survival. The flooding that occurred earlier this year is testament to that fact, as we saw tens of thousands of citizens displaced, key infrastructure damaged, and the loss of lives. Good strongly supports the increase in financial resources towards combating natural disasters, as we cannot prepare for what Mother Nature throws at us next if we haven't even cleaned up the mess she left behind. While this monetary increase is vital, the people of South Africa are once again suffering due to inaction at national, provincial, and municipal levels. The initial response to the crisis was to throw money at the problem, with the result being that the municipal and provincial governments were often at odds with each other over blatant attempts to double dip from the funds and claim insurance. While we share government sentiment that the climate crisis is real and will only continue to get worse, we cannot ignore that those infrastructure projects in the form of roads, bridges, and education facilities, while essential, matter little to those whose homes got washed away. These massive figures that are associated with rebuilding of the infrastructure should not ignore the issue of housing. Shack towns and informal settlements cannot survive any form of natural disaster. And as we continue to ignore the issue of spatial development, we continue to place communities at risk, taunting Mother Nature and daring her to repeat what happened in KZN. Government must adhere to the idea that if public infrastructure is a priority in its repairs, then the communities these projects would be built to serve need to be uplifted as well. The KZN, Eastern Cape, and Northwest municipalities who will administer these large-scale community reinvestment projects should be closely monitored, as they also have the potential of being used as model cases for similar renovation projects that will be inevitably needed throughout the rest of the country. So, House Chair, let us continue to rebuild this country on the principle of a strong foundation, as there's no greater shelter from the storm than a home. May the floods that washed away so many dreams earlier this year be the last failure in our system, so that we can come to the next disaster and we are prepared. We support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I now recognize Honorable Sheikh Imam.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairperson. Allow me to start off by informing you that the National Freedom Party will support the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill 2022. But I think the question we need to ask ourselves, a lot of these funds are being allocated, particularly towards infrastructure. And why is it necessary? Did we need a flood to highlight to us the serious problems we face in this country as far as infrastructure? Something that we see, that we use on a daily basis. Now, let's look at eThekwini, 92 million rand to rehouse those that were living on the riverbanks, and nobody knew that living on the riverbanks and that South Africa is prone, particularly KwaZulu-Natal, to floods, that there would be a disaster, and you allowed them to live. Despite the fact that we have millions of hectares of land in South Africa that we can allocate to our people to address the inequality and the highly unequal society and address what has happened during the days of apartheid, we chose not to do that. We have been receiving funding every year without fail, Chairperson, to maintain our infrastructure. We have failed to do that. And, you know, I hear some of my colleagues saying that we must make sure these monies reach them. Of course, it will reach them. It's always reached them. But what they did with the money is something else. So this money too is going to reach them. But have we ever considered the other problem? Do they have the necessary capacity to be able to deal with the challenges with infrastructure? No, they don't. If they had it, then we won't find ourselves in the situation we are finding ourselves today. So I can tell you that a lot of this money is going to go there. Instead of it going for rehabilitation, they may have to use it for new infrastructure, because the infrastructure is so poor that you haven't maintained over the last 20 years that you can't rehabilitate it anymore. You have to put new infrastructure. It's exactly the same thing with the schools, where the minister is now talking about having unisex toilets. She hasn't got her priorities right with the poorest quality education in Africa right now. But had she been ensuring that her school infrastructure was well maintained, we won't find the situation. And we're going to have more and more floods. There's no doubt about it, Chairperson. But, you know, look at what Salga says. Salga says you must offset the debt that ESCOM is being bailed out by the Treasury to what the municipalities who are in such poor state owes ESCOM. Can you imagine this coming from Salga? So you can see why municipalities are performing so poorly. And the PBO has raised this concern about municipalities, particularly local government, being able to act decisively and timeously when there's a disaster. And certainly they don't have what it takes to be able to do that. So while the National Freedom Party supports
Thank you. Your time has
we are
expired.
concerned
Thank
about.
you, Honorable Sheikh Imam. We'll
Thank
leave
you.
it there. And now recognize Honorable Matafa.
Thank you very much, House Chair. House Chair, honorable members, fellow South Africans. House Chair, let me state right from the onset, the ANC supports this report. The bill makes 10.1% of the total available non-interest spending allocation to the sphere of local government, with the total addition to local government equitable share of 5.3 billion, taking the total expended resource for local government over the 2022 MTEF to 523 billion, with local government equitable share allocation estimated to reach 306.9 billion over the 2022 MTEF. The equitable share transfer to municipalities will grow to 9% in the 2023-24, 7.6% in 2024-25, and 6.8% in 25-26, an average of 7.8% over the next 3 years, with conditional grants growing by 3.6%. The ANC aligns with the FFC and PBO in welcoming the increase in conditional grant. Honorable Kwankwa Ntlangwini, this is where cushioning the poor happens, because these increases, amongst others, are aimed at providing cushion to municipalities from rising cost of bulk electricity, bulk water cost, as well as the cost of basic services. The intervention will ensure continuous delivery of free basic services to poor households. In line with the present injunction in April to make flood relief funds available, a proposed 3.3 billion is added to the municipal disaster recovery grant to fund the repair, reconstruction, and rehabilitation of municipal infrastructure damaged by the floods. And these funds will be divided as follows. A proposed total of 3 billion is allocated to KwaZulu-Natal province municipalities, eThekwini municipality, Umhlathuze local municipality, Uthugela district, Umgungundlovu district, and Ilembe district municipality. A proposed total of 290 million is allocated to the Western Cape province district municipalities, Overberg district, Cape Winelands district, and Garden Route district. A proposed total of 34 million is allocated to the Winima Digizela Mandela local municipality, which was affected by the December 2021 and April 2022 floods, which visited the province of the Eastern Cape. The ANC further welcomes the following additions to local government allocations in 2022-23 earmarked for disaster relief. The shifting of 145 million from provincial disaster response grant to municipal disaster response grant to capacitate municipalities to render assistance to the affected the most by the floods. 92 million is added to the informal settlements upgrading partnership grant in eThekwini for the purchase of land for the relocation of displaced flood victims. Honorable Ntlangwini, before you build houses, you need to get the land where you're going to build the houses. So money is allocated for that purpose. So you can't build where the victims have been washed away by floods. We are removing them, we're building them somewhere. We're going to buy land with the 92 million. To ensure a speedy response to any disaster that may befall the country in this financial year, 248 million rands is allocated to the Municipal Disaster Response Grant. Honorable De Villiers, planning through foresight and not after the fact, as you claimed when you were here at the podium. The ANC's commitment to the provision of an equitable transportation system, thereby fostering social cohesion and connecting municipal residents to economic opportunities, is supported by the addition of 461 million to the public transport network grant. Another welcome development is the 6.5 billion over the MTF earmarked to fund municipal projects approved to the sixth window of the budget facility infrastructure, or BFI. These projects range from much needed social housing, rural bridges, projects, student accommodation implemented in eThekwini, Johannesburg, Drakenstein, Solplagi, and Nelson Mandela Bay municipality. Honorable Nkwanke and Honorable Heron, one of the pillars of the ERRP is infrastructure development, and this allocation speaks to that. Another 8.1 billion from the BFI through the indirect regional bulk infrastructure grant in projects being implemented in Moretele North, Pilanesberg bulk water supply, Unkomazi water project is indicative of the government's commitment towards the economic reconstruction and recovery plan and the ultimate economic recovery. On rollovers, Chair, the proposed total of 1 million is rolled over for the integrated national electrification project for municipalities to fund 50 electrification connections in Swellendam, in Dikazong local municipality. 2.15 million rollover of the title deed restoration grant is welcome. It will see the property rights affirmed to previously disadvantaged communities like the residents of white blocks in Lodium, Ward 61 in the city of Tshwane, who for time immemorial have been pleading and begging for the finalization of the transfer of the properties. A proposed total of 15 million is rolled over in the indirect regional bulk infrastructure grant to fund operational payments for the VAL bulk infrastructure pollution remediation project in Mfuleni local municipality. Another shifting of funds, Chair, is the 100 million rands from the direct component allocation to the neighborhood development partnership grant to the indirect component in the Mohali City local municipality, Kwaduguza local municipality, and Mfuleni local municipality. These funds will be used to fund project preparation, planning, and implementation. This is in line with the minister's commitment to building capacity for service delivery. So the issues of lack of capacity is something of the past. because the MTBPS confirmed that 9.1 billion has been spent across 40 state agencies in 2019 and 2020 to help municipality build capacity and function efficiently, targeting the following 6 areas: funded budget, audit outcomes, M-score, revenue management, asset management, and SCM. Honorable Chair, I can confirm that with these interventions, lack of capacity will be a thing of the past in local government through the interventions of National Treasury and the Minister of Finance. With that, Chairperson, I thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Matapa. I now recognize the Independent Congress. Unfortunately, I have no name next to the Independent Congress. The Independent Congress. Cope. The PAC. Unfortunately, I have no name next to it. The PAC. Al-Jama, Honorable Hendricks.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, I don't know what kind of a minister we have. Why must you wait for Mother Nature to, for example, allocate money, 6 billion rand after the floods? Why couldn't he allocate that money before the floods and really uplift the community? So the minister mustn't smile in this house. However, Al-Jama welcomes the additional revenue of 6 billion allocated to various provincial and local governments with the assistance of Mother Nature to assist in recovering from the damage caused by the March 2020 floods. Why must there be damage when, and money is not given beforehand, before these floods occur? We are also concerned of reports that much of this relief funds have failed to reach the actual victims. Government should have a proper and efficient oversight on the relief funds to ensure that they reach those that they were intended for. So I don't know whether Mother Nature must strike the minister and his team with lightning to make sure that the money reaches the proper people. We continue to see the financial crisis in several municipalities and their failure to execute efficient service delivery. Government is not doing enough to hold those accountable for wasteful expenditure in local government, which is increasing. There are provincial governments who are behind in their expenditure targets, which will again lead to a fiscal dumping in the last quarter of the financial year. I think they're waiting for Mother Nature to spend the money. Our economy can hardly afford this. Government's view that the amendments enable South Africans to save for non-retirement emergencies via their retirement funds is wishful thinking. We've heard justified concerns that the government's part on the fiscal consolidation is not sustainable. Our first concern should be whether the Division of Revenue Amendment address these concerns, and will it alleviate the flight of the poor? To really address the needs of the poor, we need to look at illicit financial flows. We cannot allow companies like Glencore to have illicit financial flows, and the money meant for the poor goes out of the country without being properly accounted for and taxed. Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Hendricks. Interesting insights that you have about Mother Nature and where it will hit. I now recognize Honorable Mare.
Geagte voorsitter, Suid-Afrikaners gebruik steeds op groot skaal ongeskreëerde krediet, soos kredietkaarte, oortrokke geriewe en persoonlike lenings. Salarisse het nie tred gehou met inflasie die afgelope paar jare nie, en verbruikers het nou gemiddeld 62% van hulle besteedbare inkomste nodig vir skuldpaaiemente. Die rentekoers het sedert November 2021, 'n jaar gelede, met 2,75 persentasiepunte gestyg. Weens die lae rentekoerse meer as 2 jaar gelede kon meer verbruikers 'n motor of 'n huis of beide aanskaf. Met die verhoogde rentekoers brand baie verbruikers nou vas. Voorsitter, ons as lede van die nasionale parlement is verkies om wetgewing daar te stel waarbinne Suid-Afrika kan floreer en groei en oorsig uit te voer dat dit geskied. En die vraag is, het ons dit gedoen? En die antwoord is 'n groot nee. Die getal staatsamptenare het toegeneem en hulle salarisse en lone het gestyg. Verhoogde salarisse was ook weens verhogings in die verlede bo die inflasiekoers. As gevolg hiervan verhoog die moontlikheid dat ons binnekort weghol inflasie kan ervaar. Swak ekonomiese groei het werksgeleenthede en wins geknehalter, met baie kleiner besighede moes hulle deure sluit. COVID en die opeenvolgende ekonomiese inperkings het ook in die afgelope 2,5 jaar sedert Maart 2020 'n geweldige impak gehad op die arbeidsuitsette van mense. En daar moes 'n totale verandering plaasvind in terme van hoe om arbeid te verrig en van watter domicilium. Voorsitter, nader aan ons as lede van die nasionale parlement en ons toesigrol, staatsondernemings wurg die tesourie met reddingsboeie op 'n jaarlikse basis. Die term omdraai-strategie by publieke instellings word nou as 'n alledaagse woord gebruik, maar op 'n jaar-tot-jaar basis realiseer weinig. Eskom is en bly die grootste probleem vir die staat. Met 'n skuldlas van ongeveer 400 miljard rand kan die rentekomponent nie gediens word nie. 'n Beoogde oorname van ongeveer 260 miljard rand van Eskom se skuld deur die tesourie is net 'n verskywing van 'n las binne die staatsopset. Dit sal wel die balansstaat van Eskom beter laat lyk en Eskom in 'n posisie plaas om sy rentedraende skuld te diens, maar die skuld is eenvoudig verplaas na tesourie. Korrupsie by Eskom moet eenvoudig aangespreek en uitgeroei word. Vir Suid-Afrika se ekonomie om volhoubaar te groei, benodig ons betroubare energie vir besigheid en werksgeleenthede vir ons jeug. Addisionele befondsing vir Denel, Transnet en Sanral gee tesourie hoofbrekings en trek die staat verder af in die afgrond met sy skuldlas. Publieke instellings moet 'n bydrae maak tot die staatskas en jaar op jaar 'n reddingsboei van die tesourie versoek nie. Indien CEO en Exco tesame met rade aangestel oor sodanige entiteite dit nie suksesvol kan
Baie dankie, your time has expired. I've given you extra time, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mare. Baie dankie. I now recognize Honorable E.D. Peters.
Honorable Chairperson.
Honorable Peters, please just pause, Honorable Peters. Let's wait for them when they are ready to listen to you. Proceed, Honorable Peters.
Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Ministers and Deputy Ministers, Honorable Members, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by indicating that the ANC supports the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill 2022. Honorable members, the economy was still trying to recover from the deleterious effects of COVID-19, the July unrest and the floods in KZN and the Eastern Cape. We now know that the economy grew by 1.9% in Q1 of 2022 and then shrunk by 0.7% in Q2 of 2022. The negative growth was mainly due to the external shocks like the Russia-Ukraine conflict and slower international economic growth in our main trading partners. I'm delighted to stand in front of you and say, despite the economic hurricane, the provinces are getting even more resources to deliver on the needs of our people. Honorable members, I intend focusing on the changes taking place at the provincial level through the provincial equity share and conditional grants. Honorable members, I heard Honorable Member or Hendricks indicate that
we need to plan for disasters. I've never heard something like this because it is impossible to anticipate that disasters will happen at that particular level. So I think, Honorable Hendricks, please, ons moet die mense wat gooi op die grond nie. We are not Google on the floor. These allocations are meant to build more resilient communities. They are to intervene in education as an investment to the future of our country. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, this bill provides much needed safety net for those sections of our community who are poor and most vulnerable. These are the people the ANC worry about. And we will leave no stone unturned to better their lives and sustain their livelihoods. We agree with the president when I said, and I quote, if there is one thing we all agree on, it is the present situation of deep poverty, unemployment, and inequality, which is unacceptable and unsustainable, close quotes. And I know the EFF and DA and Freedom Front Plus does not support this bill because they really don't care about the poorest of the poor. They only grandstand here and come, yes, de Villiers, Honorable de Villiers and Honorable Marais, hulle ken dat hulle net die mense van Suid-Afrika vir votes. As hulle gaan om stemme te werk, dan ken hulle die arme mense, dan ken hulle die mense wat in die plattelande bly. So dit is belangrik that we do this. As the ANC, we believe that if we were to focus on infrastructure spend, half of our problems will be resolved. The floods and unrest caused untold harm to railways, roads, bulk infrastructure, schools, hospitals, etc. This will allow private sector to invest if we invest in infrastructure. And together we can grow the economy and provide job opportunities to our people. We can do it. We did it in 2010 when we all pulled in the same direction and provided one of the best World Cups tournaments the world has ever seen. And we want to take this opportunity to wish Qatar well. And we are saying, despite Bafana being visibly absent, we will borrow Qatar, the vuvuzelas. 300 million is being added for education infrastructure grant caused by the April 2022 disaster. 7.1 billion is added to the provincial roads maintenance grant to deal with the deteriorating provincial roads. Honorable member, the sight of our children struggling to cross rivers in their quest for education is painful. This we find mainly in the most rural provinces. That is why the ANC supports the 3.7 billion rand added to the provincial roads maintenance grant for building of modular steel bridges in rural areas through the Welisizwe Rural Bridges Program. This is done in collaboration with the South African National Defence Force. In the current fiscal year, the provincial equity share is allocated 49 million rand. Direct conditional grants increased by 1.948 billion rand. There is 1.8 billion rand for the construction and upgrading of Kuha Development Corporation, bulk infrastructure, which is a big economic boost to Gqeberha and the Eastern Cape. Chairperson, over the years, civil society has been calling for more resources to provinces and municipalities. These are levels of government which are closer to our people. And I'm happy, honorable members, to say the ANC has got an ear to listen. In the MTF starting 2022-2023, we are seeing a higher percentage of nationally raised revenues going to these spheres of government, which are closer to the people. In education, a total of 20 billion rand is added for the cost of employees. Educators must listen, because the opposition is going to vote against this bill. So you say you don't care about our teachers, you don't care about our learners, you pay lip service here. The African National Congress welcomes an additional 1.6 billion for early childhood development. kinders wat by die kleuterskole is, hulle moet ook education kry. So ons sê, vir ons is dit belangrik dat ons kinders ook voeding kry by die skole. Daarom is daar 1.5 biljoen rand vir dit op sy gesit. 9 miljoen kinders gaan elke dag by die skool kan eet. These children will not go to bed hungry whilst the ANC is in government. And I quote our former president, Nelson Mandela, when he said, giving children a healthy start in life, no matter where they are, born or circumstances of their birth, is moral obligation of every one of us. Close quotes. The bill.
Honorable Peters, please pause. There's a loud noise on my left, and I might even have to add your time on that. Honorable Peters, Honorable Peters, sit asseblief. Honorable members, I'm asking you not to converse aloud because you are suffocating the speaker on the podium. Honorable Peters, I know you have increased the volume. Now the volume is really getting to us. Please proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. I challenge you, honorable members, to support this bill, which seeks to improve the lives of our people and working condition of our health workers. Failure to vote for this bill is to condemn the multitudes of our people who depend on our ARVs, TB sufferers, and those people who depend on public health laboratories. This one needs no petty politicking. Let's pull in the same direction for the benefit of our people. Honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, these are some of the conditions we are putting to these allocations. If money is allocated for houses, members of the executive, we want to see houses. This money should be used efficiently and effectively. We require proper accountabilities from you as ministers and deputy ministers. No wasteful and fruitless expenditure. We expect SMMEs to participate in any case. History shows that they are the biggest job creators. Let Black companies, women-owned companies, companies owned by young people be part of rebuilding. In other words, honorable members, let us invoke the spirit of 2010 as we try to make our country a better place by decreasing inequality, poverty, and unemployment. Yes, the African National Congress supports the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, and I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Peters. Thank you. I now recognize the Deputy Minister of Finance.
Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, good afternoon once more. This budget is not austere. The local government equitable share increases at an annual average rate of 7.8%, and municipal conditional grants increase by 3.6%. The provincial equitable share increases by annual rate of 2.4%, and provincial grants increases by 4.3%. So this budget is not austere. This budget is pro-poor. The Division of Revenue redistributes substantial resources from the urban economy to fund services in rural areas. Chair, metropolitan municipalities account for 70% of personal income tax revenue, but receive only 31% of local government transfers. Similarly, 61 mostly rural municipalities also receive 31% of transfers to local government, but only account for only 5% of personal income revenues. This budget is pro-economic growth. We're investing in economic growth by funding our municipalities on large-scale projects that are catalytic and strategic. 6.5 billion over the MTF is allocated to several municipalities to fund infrastructure projects approved through the Budget Facility for Infrastructure, BFI. Chair, some of the problems facing local government in delivering public services have been described by several speakers today. We agree with Honorable Heron and Honorable Dipua Peters that this is not just about throwing money into the system. Failure to spend allocated funds is also one of the problems of underperformance in our local government. Underspending in the capital budget, especially conditional grants, is a major concern. It is directly related to weak multi-year planning, supply chain management challenges, over-optimistic capital budgets, and engineering skills. Consequently, municipal infrastructure investment is derailed. We will be building capacity in municipalities through implementing a district-based approach to speed up service delivery and to ensure that municipalities are properly supported and adequately resourced. We'll ensure that all municipalities are enabled to perform their functions and duties effectively and efficiently by mobilizing and making available expertise, key skilled personnel, and systems that can be shared between districts and local municipalities as needed. As observed by speakers today, this budget responds to the negative effects of climate change, including floods and disasters. This budget contributes towards building resilient infrastructure. You may ask me how. We support infrastructure planning to strengthen our climate resilient capacity. We are assisting municipalities with technical assistance to strengthen their capabilities to integrate climate information into city planning and processes. It's a budget worth supporting because it's in the interest of the poor, economic growth, and dealing with the negative effects of climate change and increasing capacity of local government. Honorable members and chair, Bafana Bafana is playing. Mozambique is playing. Bafana Bafana is playing tomorrow against Mozambique and Angola in preparation for the CAF next year. So as we support this budget, can we also remember and support Bafana Bafana? I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Minister. Honorable members, that concludes the debate. Are there any objections to the bill being read a second time?
Yes.
No objections. Honorable Lothrit,
Chair, please note the objection of the DA.
objection noted.
Please
And
note
the objection of the Freedom
EFF.
And
Objection
the
noted.
objection of the Freedom Front Plus.
Meneer Asta, kom weer asseblief.
Notuleer asseblief die teenstem van die Vryheidsfront Plus.
Objection noted.
And as mentioned by the chief whip of the ACDP, the objection of the ACDP as well, Chair. Thank you.
ACDP objection noted. And report agreed to. The secretary will read the bill a second time.
Division of Revenue Amendment Bill.
The bill will be sent to the National Council of Provinces for concurrence. That concludes the business of the day and the House is adjourned. Thank